Blood and gold paint the borderlands red. When a veiled woman's whisper unleashes hell across the frontier, 20 cases of stolen gold vanish into the mountains, and with them, any hope of law in the lawless territory near El Paso. As banks bleed dry and desperate townsfolk watch their futures crumble, one cold-eyed bounty hunter named Luke Mercer makes a promise that will shake the desert to its bones. He will find the gold, destroy the gang, and uncover the betrayal hiding behind respectability's mask. But in a land where greed wears many faces, the most dangerous enemy might be the one no one suspects. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. Hit that like button, and let's ride into the storm together. The late afternoon sun hammered down on the town of Esperanza like a blacksmith's anvil, turning the dusty main street into a ribbon of white heat that shimmered and danced in the merciless air. Inside the thick-walled office of the Territorial Bank and Trust, the air was different, heavy, stifling, thick with anger and fear. 5 men sat around a scarred oak table, their faces glistening with sweat that had nothing to do with the weather outside. Thomas Barrett leaned forward in his chair, his knuckles white where they gripped the edge of the table. The banker's normally composed face had gone red with barely contained fury, the veins standing out on his forehead like ropes under taut skin. 6 raids in 4 months, he said, his voice tight and clipped. 6 banks across 3 territories. They hit us like lightning and vanish like smoke. The deposits we held for ranchers, merchants, families saving for their futures, all gone. Do you understand what that means? Marshal Henry Keaton sat at the far end of the table, his weathered hands folded across his considerable belly. The lawman's face showed the deep lines of a man who'd spent 30 years trying to bring order to chaos and had learned the hard way that chaos always had the advantage. "We understand, Tom," Keaton said quietly. "We all understand. But understanding don't change the facts. Corban's gang moves too fast, knows the country too well. By the time word reaches us and we can organize a posse, they're already across the border or holed up in some canyon we'd need a week to search." "Then get more men," Barrett snapped. "Hire scouts. Pay for information. I don't care what it costs. We're losing 10 times that amount every time those bastards ride." Judge Samuel Pierce, a thin man with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too many bad men walk free on technicalities, shook his head slowly. The gesture had a finality to it that made Barrett's jaw clench even tighter. "The territorial government won't authorize additional funds," Pierce said. "I argued the case myself last month in Santa Fe. They say the raids are a local matter, that we need to handle it with local resources. They're too busy arguing about statehood and railroad rights to care about a few frontier banks." "A few banks?" Barrett's voice rose dangerously. "They took 80,000 from us alone. The Mesilla Bank lost 60. The stage depot in Las Cruces was carrying another 40 when they hit it. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. Money that belongs to the people trying to build lives in this territory. And you're telling me Santa Fe doesn't care?" "What I'm telling you, Pierce said evenly, "is that we're on our own. Same as we've always been out here." The 5th man at the table, a heavy-set rancher named Dutch Morrison, slammed his palm against the wood hard enough to make the water glasses jump. "Then we handle it ourselves," Morrison growled. "We pool money, put together a reward that'll make every gun for hire between here and California sit up and take notice. We make Rafael Corban worth more dead than any honest man can earn in 5 years of hard work. Let the bounty hunters do what the law can't, or won't." Marshal Keaton's expression darkened. "I won't have vigilante justice in my territory, Dutch. We do this proper, or we don't do it at all." "Proper?" Morrison barked out a bitter laugh. "How's proper working out so far, Marshal? How many more raids before you admit that playing by the rules just gets honest people robbed and killed?" The argument that erupted then had a familiar rhythm to it. The same points made in slightly different words. The same frustrations aired with increasing volume. The same fundamental impasse between those who believed in the law and those who'd lost faith in its ability to protect them. The voices rose and overlapped until they became a single angry roar of helplessness and rage. None of them noticed when the door to the office opened. The man who entered moved with a silence that seemed unnatural for someone wearing boots and spurs. He stood just inside the threshold, waiting, his presence somehow filling the room despite his complete stillness. It was Barrett who saw him first. The banker's words died in his throat, and the sudden silence spread like a ripple across water until all 5 men were staring at the stranger. He wasn't a large man, perhaps 5'10", lean rather than heavily muscled, but something about him commanded attention. He wore trail-worn clothes that had seen hard use but were scrupulously clean, dark pants tucked into scuffed boots, a shirt the color of desert sand, a black vest that hung open despite the heat. Twin Colt revolvers sat low on his hips in holsters that showed the kind of wear that came from constant practice rather than simple use. His hat was pulled low enough to shadow his face, but beneath the brim, his eyes were visible, pale gray, cold, and utterly without mercy. "Gentlemen," he said. His voice was quiet, almost soft, but it carried clearly through the room. "I understand you have a problem with a man named Rafael Corban." Marshal Keaton recovered first. He pushed his chair back and stood, his hand resting casually near his gun belt, not threatening, but ready. "The door was locked," Keaton said. "How'd you get in here?" The stranger's mouth quirked in something that might have been a smile, though there was no warmth in it. "The lock was simple. Your clerk was occupied with the afternoon deposits. I have business with these gentlemen that couldn't wait." "Well, you can just turn around and wait outside like everyone else," Keaton said firmly. "This is a private meeting." "About putting together a reward for Corban," the stranger said. It wasn't a question. "About how the law can't seem to catch a gang that's been bleeding this territory dry for months. About how desperate men are starting to consider desperate measures." The silence that followed was different now, charged with a new kind of tension. Barrett leaned back in his chair, studying the stranger with calculating eyes. "You've been listening at doors," Barrett said. "That tells me you're either a spy or someone who thinks he can profit from our misfortune. Which is it?" "Neither." The stranger moved forward into the room, his steps measured and deliberate. He pulled out the empty chair at the table and sat without invitation, his hands resting flat on the scarred wood. "My name is Luke Mercer. I'm a bounty hunter out of Arizona territory. I've spent the last 6 weeks tracking Rafael Corban's movements, learning his patterns, talking to people who've crossed his path, and lived to tell about it. And I'm here to tell you that I can bring him in." Morrison snorted. "You and what army? We've had bounty hunters through here before, son. They all talked big. Most of them ended up dead or running back to wherever they came from with their tails between their legs." "I'm not most bounty hunters." Mercer's voice didn't rise, but something in his tone made Morrison's sneer falter. "And I don't need an army. I need information, and I need you to stay out of my way once I start moving. Can you manage that?" Judge Pierce leaned forward, his sharp eyes studying Mercer with the same intensity he used to weigh testimony in his courtroom. "You sound very confident, Mr. Mercer, perhaps excessively so, given that you're proposing to do alone what the combined resources of 3 territorial marshals' offices haven't managed to accomplish." "I'm not working alone," Mercer said. "I have a partner, a man who knows this country and the people in it better than anyone in this room. And I have something else. I have motivation that goes beyond whatever reward money you're planning to offer." "What motivation?" Barrett asked sharply. Mercer's cold eyes fixed on the banker. "That's my business. What matters to you is results. I'll bring Corban in within 2 months, dead or alive. I'll recover what can be recovered of your stolen money. And I'll do it without a posse, without territorial authority, and without any interference from the law." Keaton's face darkened. "Now, hold on just a minute. Marshal," Mercer cut him off with icy politeness. "With all respect, the law has had its chance. 4 months and 6 raids, and you're not one step closer to Corban than you were when this started. That tells me either you're incompetent, which I don't believe, or Corban has advantages that conventional law enforcement can't overcome. I'm offering you a third option." "Vigilante justice," Keaton said flatly. "That's what you're offering, and I won't stand for it in my jurisdiction." "What I'm offering," Mercer said, his voice taking on an edge sharp enough to cut, "is to solve your problem before more innocent people lose everything they've worked for. Is your pride in the law really worth more than their livelihoods, more than their lives?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Keaton's face flushed, but before he could respond, Barrett held up a hand. "What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Mercer? Specifics." Mercer's expression didn't change. "I'll track Corban. I'll find his hideouts, identify his men, and dismantle his operation piece by piece. When I have him cornered, I'll bring him back to face justice. preferably alive so he can tell you where the rest of your gold is hidden. But if he forces my hand, I'll do what needs to be done. Either way, the raids stop." "And what do you want in return?" Morrison asked. "Half the posted reward when I bring him in, that's all. I don't want territory, I don't want recognition, and I don't want anyone asking questions about my methods. You pay me, we go our separate ways, and you sleep better knowing Corban isn't planning his next raid." Barrett exchanged glances with the other men at the table. The calculations were plain on his face, weighing risk against reward, desperation against principle, the demands of his depositors against the warnings in Marshal Keaton's eyes. "The current reward is $5,000, Barrett said slowly. "Combined with what the other banks and the territorial government have posted, that brings the total to $20,000. You're asking for $10,000 to do what you claim you can do in 2 months. I'm asking for half of what Corban is worth. Seems fair, considering I'm the one who'll be dodging bullets while you count money behind these thick walls." Pierce cleared his throat. "And your partner, this man who knows the country so well, who is he?" For the first time, something that might have been genuine emotion flickered in Mercer's eyes. It was gone too quickly to identify, but it left an impression like distant thunder on a still night. "His name is Santiago Vargas. Some people call him El Santo. You might have heard of him." The reaction was immediate. Morrison's eyes went wide, and even Keaton straightened in his chair. Pierce's weathered face showed the first real expression Mercer had seen, something between shock and deep unease. "El Santo," Barrett said quietly. "The one who cleaned out the Broken Spur gang last year? Who brought in the Mendoza brothers after they'd killed half a dozen lawmen?" "The same. They say he's as brutal as the outlaws he hunts," Pierce said. "That he doesn't believe in trials or jails, just graves." Mercer's smile was thin and cold. "They say a lot of things about him. Most of them are true. But what matters is that when he sets out after someone, he doesn't come back empty-handed. Neither do I." Keaton stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I won't have it. I won't authorize bounty hunters, especially ones with reputations like Vargas, operating in my territory with no oversight, no accountability. It's a recipe for disaster." "Then don't authorize it," Mercer said mildly. "Don't authorize anything. Just stay out of the way and let us work. When we're done, you can take all the credit for restoring law and order. Tell everyone it was your investigation that led to Corban's capture. I don't care about the glory, Marshal. I care about the job." Barrett's hand came down flat on the table, not in anger this time, but in decision. "I'm voting yes," the banker said. "We pool the reward money. We give Mr. Mercer what he needs in terms of information, and we let him do what needs to be done. Anyone disagree?" Morrison raised his hand immediately. "Agreed. I'm tired of watching good people suffer while we sit around debating proper procedure." Pierce hesitated, his fingers drumming a slow rhythm on the table. Finally, he nodded. "Against my better judgment, yes. But I want it on record that I'm trusting Mr. Mercer to bring Corban to trial, if at all possible. This isn't a hunting license for wholesale slaughter." "Your objection is noted, Judge," Mercer said, "and I'll do my best to accommodate it, but I won't promise what I can't control. If Corban chooses death over capture, that's his decision to make." All eyes turned to Keaton. The Marshal's face was stormy, his jaw working as he ground his teeth on words he clearly wanted to say, but couldn't. Finally, he shook his head. "I vote no. And I want everyone in this room to remember that when this goes wrong, and it will go wrong, it was against my counsel and outside the bounds of the law." "Duly noted," Barrett said crisply. "Mr. Mercer, you have your authorization from the business community, if not from the law. What do you need from us to begin?" Mercer reached into his vest and withdrew a folded piece of paper, which he spread on the table. It was a hand-drawn map, surprisingly detailed, showing the region from El Paso to the mountain ranges north and west. "I need you to mark every raid location," he said, producing a pencil and sliding it across to Barrett. "I need the dates, the amounts taken, and any witnesses who survived and might be willing to talk. I need to know if Corban ever made demands, sent messages, or did anything unusual during the robberies. Every detail matters." As Barrett began marking the map, Mercer continued, "I also need discretion. The second word gets out that I'm hunting Corban, he'll change his patterns or go to ground. As far as anyone outside this room knows, I'm just another drifter passing through. Can you keep that secret? We can, Pierce assured him. Though I suspect Corban has eyes and ears in most of these towns. You'll need to be careful. I'm always careful, Judge. It's why I'm still alive. For the next hour, Mercer questioned the men with methodical precision. He wanted to know everything, not just about the robberies themselves, but about the territory, the people, the relationships between different towns and different interests. He asked about water sources, mountain passes, border crossings. He asked about Corban's known associates, his habits, his background. He asked questions that seemed irrelevant until the pattern emerged. Mercer was building a complete picture of the landscape, both physical and human, in which his quarry moved. Finally, as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and crimson, Mercer stood. That's enough for now, he said, folding the marked map and tucking it back into his vest. I'll be in touch when I have something worth reporting. Don't try to find me or contact me. I'll come to you when the time is right. Wait, Barrett said. Where will you be staying? How do we reach you if we learn something important? You don't. If you need to pass information, leave a message with the bartender at the Silver Dollar Saloon. Write, looking for work, on the outside of the envelope. I'll check every 3 days. And if there's an emergency? Morrison asked. Mercer's cold smile returned. There won't be. Not for you. Any emergencies from here on out are going to be Corban's problem, not yours. He moved toward the door with that same unnatural silence, but Keaton's voice stopped him before he could leave. Mercer, one thing before you go. The bounty hunter turned, waiting. Keaton's eyes were hard, but there was something else there too, a grudging respect that fought against his better judgment. You seem like a man who's done this kind of work before, done it well even. But Corban isn't like the outlaws you've hunted in Arizona or wherever else you've operated. He's smart, he's ruthless, and he's got the loyalty of men who'd die before they'd betray him. You go after him with just you and Vargas, and there's a good chance you won't come back. Is there a question in there, Marshal? Why? Keaton said simply. You said you had motivation beyond the money. What is it? What makes a man walk into certain death for a cause that isn't even his own? Mercer was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that made the temperature in the room seem to drop. 3 years ago, Rafael Corban and his men rode into a small mining camp in southern New Mexico. They weren't there for gold or money. They were running from a cavalry patrol and needed supplies. The miners tried to help them, fed them, gave them fresh horses, pointed them toward safe trails through the mountains. And when Corban was done taking what he wanted, he killed every man, woman, and child in that camp, burned it to the ground so there'd be no witnesses to his passage. The room was utterly silent. My sister lived in that camp, Mercer continued, his voice never rising but somehow filling every corner of the space. She and her husband and their 2 children. The youngest was 4 years old, so when you ask me why I'm hunting Corban, Marshal, the answer is simple, because I made a promise to the dead that I would make this right. The money is just a means to an end. What I want is to look Rafael Corban in the eyes when I pull the trigger. He opened the door and stepped out into the fading light, leaving 5 men sitting in stunned silence around a table covered with maps and desperate plans. The moon was high and bright when Mercer finally made his way to the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to scrub brush and rocky ground. A small fire burned in a hollow between 2 large boulders, and beside it sat a man who seemed carved from the same stone as the landscape around him. Santiago Vargas looked up as Mercer approached, his dark eyes reflecting the firelight like polished obsidian. He was older than Mercer by perhaps 10 years, his face weathered by sun and wind until it resembled cracked leather. A scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, a souvenir from a knife fight he'd won years ago in a cantina south of the border. Like Mercer, he carried 2 pistols, but where Mercer's guns were standard Colts, Vargas favored custom-made weapons with ivory grips and barrels that had been modified for faster draw and more accurate aim. Well? Vargas asked. His English carried the musical accent of his native Mexico, but his words were sharp and precise. Did they bite? They bit. Mercer settled onto a rock across the fire from his partner. Barrett and Morrison were ready to say yes before I even finished talking. The judge took more convincing, but he came around. Only the marshal held out. Keaton. Vargas spat the name like a curse. That one, He loves the law more than he loves justice. Dangerous in a man with a badge. Maybe. But he's not stupid. He knows his hands are tied by procedure and jurisdiction. He'll grumble and make noise, but he won't actively work against us, not unless we give him reason to. Then we make sure we give him no reasons. Vargas poked at the fire with a long stick, sending sparks spiraling into the night sky. You told them about me. I did. They reacted about how you'd expect. A grin spread across Vargas's scarred face, showing teeth that were surprisingly white and even. Good. Let them be afraid. Afraid men are careful men, and careful men stay out of our way. Mercer pulled the folded map from his vest and spread it on a flat rock, weighing down the corners with stones. In the firelight, the marks Barrett had made showed clearly, 6 locations spread across the territory in a pattern that seemed random at first glance. Look at this, Mercer said, tracing lines between the marked points with his finger. What do you see? Vargas leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he studied the map. For several minutes, the only sound was the crackling of the fire and the distant howl of a coyote somewhere in the darkness. The raids move west to east, Vargas said finally, and each one is farther from the border than the last. If Corban was using Mexico as a sanctuary, he would hit targets near the crossing and run south. But he is moving deeper into the territory instead. Exactly, which means either he's not running to Mexico at all, or he has a base somewhere in the mountains where he feels safe enough to operate at distance from his escape route. Or, Vargas said slowly, he is not the one planning the raids. Someone else chooses the targets, and Corban merely executes the plan. Mercer looked up sharply. What makes you say that? The timing. Vargas pointed to the dates Barrett had written beside each location. See? The raids come exactly 2 weeks apart, like clockwork. Bandits are not so precise. They strike when they see opportunity, when they need money, when they feel bold. But this is planning, organization. Someone is telling Corban when and where to attack. The observation sent a chill down Mercer's spine that had nothing to do with the cooling desert night. He'd been so focused on tracking Corban himself that he hadn't considered the possibility of a mastermind behind the scenes, pulling strings and calling shots. If you're right, Mercer said carefully, then bringing in Corban might not be enough. The raids would just start again with a new gang and a new enforcer. See, we must find the head of the snake, not just cut off one fang. Vargas stabbed his stick into the fire, sending up a shower of embers. But first we find Corban. Make him talk. Make him tell us who gives him orders. That assumes he knows. If whoever's running this operation is smart, and they'd have to be to pull off 6 successful raids, they'd use intermediaries, keep their identity hidden even from their own people. Then we find the intermediaries. We pull the thread until the whole garment unravels. Vargas's smile was predatory now, showing teeth. I'm very good at making men talk, amigo. You know this. Mercer did know it. He'd seen Vargas work before, had watched his partner extract information from hardened criminals who'd sooner die than betray their comrades, until Vargas went to work on them. The methods weren't pretty, weren't civilized, and definitely weren't legal. But they were effective. We'll do what we have to do, Mercer said, but we do it smart. No unnecessary violence, no civilian casualties. We're not like them, Santiago. We can't be. Speak for yourself, my friend. But Vargas's grin took the edge off the words. I know the difference between justice and vengeance. Even if others sometimes forget, we will be careful. We will be precise. And we will finish what we start. Mercer rolled up the map and returned it to his vest. Tomorrow, we ride north to Las Cruces. That's where the last raid happened, 3 days ago. Trail might still be warm enough to follow. And what of the woman? Vargas asked. Mercer's head snapped up. What woman? The one who was watching you in town today. Young, pretty, Mexican, or mixed blood. She followed you from the bank to the general store, then to the stable. Very interested in where you went and who you talked to. I didn't see anyone. Because she is good at not being seen, but I'm better at seeing. Vargas's expression was serious now. She wore working clothes but walked like someone educated, someone not used to rough labor. And she had a gun, small pistol hidden in her skirt. A woman alone and armed in a town like this, following a stranger? That is worth knowing about. Mercer's hand drifted unconsciously toward his holstered Colt. Think she's one of Corban's people? Possible. Or she could be someone else interested in the bounty, or someone with her own reasons for wanting to know who hunts the hunter. Vargas shrugged. Tomorrow, before we ride, I will find her. Ask her some questions. Learn if she is a threat or just curious. Be gentle about it. Last thing we need is Marshal Keaton deciding we're harassing the locals. I am always gentle, Vargas said with mock offense. Like a summer breeze, like a baby's kiss. Despite the tension of the day, despite the weight of the hunt that lay ahead, Mercer found himself smiling. You're a lot of things, Santiago, but gentle isn't on the list. Perhaps not. But I get results, no? And that is what matters. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire burn down to glowing coals. Around them, the desert night came alive with sounds. The rustle of small creatures in the brush, the whisper of wind through the rocks, the vast silence of stars wheeling overhead in patterns older than memory. Finally, Mercer spoke again. You know this could get us killed. Corban's dangerous, and if there really is someone else pulling his strings, they're dangerous too. Smart, connected, ruthless enough to organize multiple bank robberies and get away clean every time. We might be riding into something bigger than we can handle. Vargas was quiet for a moment, his scarred face thoughtful in the dying firelight. 3 years ago, he said slowly, my daughter, you remember I told you about her? Rosa, you said she died of fever. That was not the whole truth. Vargas's voice was soft but steady. She was killed, shot by a drunk American in Juarez who thought it would be funny to see if a Mexican girl could dance when bullets hit the ground near her feet. His aim was bad, or maybe it was good, and he meant to kill her all along. It does not matter. She died, and the man who killed her walked free because he had money, and I had nothing but rage. He looked up, meeting Mercer's eyes across the embers. So when you tell me this hunt could get us killed, I say, so what? What is life worth if we do not stand against the evil in it? What is survival worth if we let monsters walk free while innocent people suffer? My Rosa is dead. Your sister is dead. We cannot bring them back, but we can make sure that Corban and everyone like him understands that there is still justice in this world, even if it comes on our terms instead of the law's. Mercer felt something tight in his chest loosen slightly. It wasn't comfort. Comfort was a luxury neither of them could afford, but it was understanding, shared purpose, the knowledge that whatever happened, he wasn't facing it alone. Then we ride at dawn, Mercer said. We find Corban. We find whoever's using him, and we end this, one way or another. One way or another, Vargas agreed. But preferably with us alive and them dead, yes? Preferably. Vargas kicked dirt over the fire, smothering the last of the flames. In the sudden darkness, lit only by starlight and the pale moon, the two men gathered their gear and prepared for the morning's journey. Neither of them noticed the figure watching from the shadows of a nearby rock formation, a young woman with long dark hair and intelligent eyes that missed nothing. She waited until they'd settled into their bedrolls before she slipped away, moving through the night like smoke, back toward the town that slept uneasily under its blanket of stars. In her pocket, carried close against her heart, was a small photograph, a young woman's face, smiling at the camera with hope and innocence. The face was similar enough to her own that the relationship was obvious. Sisters, perhaps, or cousins. And in her other pocket, heavy and cold, was the small pistol Vargas had correctly identified. She checked it by touch in the darkness, making sure the cylinder was loaded, the action smooth and ready. Tomorrow would bring revelations. Tomorrow would bring pain. Tomorrow, the hunt would truly begin. But tonight, in the cooling desert air, 3 people slept with thoughts of vengeance and justice tangled together like thorns around a dying rose, and the line between the two growing thinner with each passing hour. The dawn came hard and bright over the desert, the sun breaking over the eastern mountains like a hammer striking an anvil. Mercer woke to find Vargas already up, checking his weapons with the methodical care of a man who knew his life might depend on them before the day was through. The older man's fingers moved with practiced precision over each pistol, testing the action, examining the cylinders, making sure everything was exactly as it should be. "Sleep well?" Vargas asked without looking up from his work. "Well enough." Mercer rolled out of his bedroll and stretched the stiffness from his muscles. Any sign of our mysterious shadow from yesterday? Not yet, but she will come. Vargas finally looked up, his scarred face certain in the morning light. People like her, people with secrets and questions. They always come. It is only a matter of when. They broke camp quickly, scattering the ashes of their fire and erasing any sign they'd been there. In a land where information was currency and strangers were viewed with suspicion, leaving no trace was simply good practice. By the time the sun had cleared the mountains completely, they were mounted and ready to ride. Mercer's horse was a sturdy bay gelding with intelligent eyes and the kind of endurance that came from good breeding and better care. Vargas rode a gray mare that looked deceptively gentle until you noticed the muscle in her haunches and the alertness in her bearing. These weren't the flashy horses that drew attention in town. They were working animals, chosen for reliability over appearance. They were halfway to the stable to collect their remaining gear when the woman stepped out of the shadows between two buildings. She was young, perhaps 25, with dark hair pulled back in a practical braid and eyes that held both wariness and determination. Vargas had been right about her background. She wore the simple cotton dress and shawl of a working woman, but something in the way she carried herself suggested education, refinement. Her hands, visible where they clutched the shawl around her shoulders, were calloused but well kept, the hands of someone who'd known both hard work and better days. "Mr. Mercer," she said, her voice steady despite the obvious tension in her frame. "I need to speak with you, both of you." Vargas's hand drifted casually toward his gun belt, but Mercer shook his head slightly. The woman caught the gesture, and a flicker of fear crossed her face, quickly suppressed. "You've been following me," Mercer said. It wasn't a question. "Why?" "Because I know who you are and what you're planning to do, and because I can help you." "Help us do what exactly?" Vargas asked, his tone deceptively mild. The woman glanced around the empty street, checking for observers. This early, most of the town was still asleep, but a few early risers were beginning to emerge. The baker lighting his ovens, a shopkeeper sweeping his porch. She lowered her voice. "Help you find Rafael Corban. I know where he's been, where he might go next. I know his habits, his weaknesses, the men he trusts." She paused, then added with quiet intensity, "I know because I was one of them, one of his people." The words hung in the air like smoke. Mercer studied her face, looking for signs of deception and finding only a kind of desperate honesty that was hard to fake. "You're claiming you rode with Corban's gang?" he said carefully. "Not claiming. Stating fact." Her chin came up defiantly. "For 8 months, I was part of his operation. I cooked, I cleaned, I tended the horses. I watched, and I listened, and I learned. And 3 weeks ago, I escaped. I've been running ever since, staying one step ahead of the men he sent to bring me back." Vargas circled her slowly, his eyes taking in every detail. "Why would Corban send men after a cook? What makes you valuable enough to chase?" "Because I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. Because I know the raids aren't random. They're planned by someone else, someone outside the gang. And because I can prove it." Mercer felt his pulse quicken. This aligned too perfectly with the theory he and Vargas had developed the night before to be coincidence. Either this woman was telling the truth, or she was an exceptionally skilled liar sent to lead them astray. "Prove it how?" he asked. From beneath her shawl, the woman withdrew a folded piece of paper, yellowed and creased from being carried close to her body. She hesitated for just a moment, then held it out to Mercer. He took it carefully, unfolding it to reveal handwriting in elegant script, the kind of penmanship taught in expensive schools back east. The message was brief, but damning. "Next target, Territorial Bank, Las Cruces. Vault schedule confirms Thursday shipment. Usual terms. Burn after reading." There was no signature, no indication of who had sent it, but the date at the top was from 2 weeks ago, exactly 3 days before the Las Cruces raid. "Where did you get this?" Mercer demanded. "Corban doesn't read well," the woman said. "He had me go through his messages sometimes, tell him what they said. He thought I was too stupid to understand what I was reading." He was wrong. Vargas took the paper from Mercer's hand, studying it with narrowed eyes. "This could be a forgery. You could have written it yourself to gain our trust." "I could have," the woman agreed, "but why would I? If I wanted to lead you into a trap, I could have done it a dozen easier ways. I could have told you Corban was in a specific location and let you walk into an ambush. Instead, I'm standing here in broad daylight, risking my life to give you information that could help you catch him." She had a point. Mercer exchanged glances with Vargas, reading the calculation in his partner's eyes. They were both thinking the same thing. This was either an incredible opportunity or a carefully laid trap. The question was which. "What's your name?" Mercer asked. "Isabella. Isabella Mendez." "And what do you want from us, Isabella? Information doesn't come free, especially not information like this." Isabella's expression hardened. "I want protection. I want to be able to stop looking over my shoulder, waiting for one of Corban's men to put a bullet in my back. You kill him or bring him in, and I'm safe. That's all I want." "And if we don't believe you?" Vargas asked. "If we think you are lying to us, leading us into danger? Then I'll take my chances alone, same as I have been." Isabella's voice was quiet but firm. "But you'll be making a mistake. I know things that could save your lives. I know which of Corban's men are loyal and which ones are just there for the money. I know the routes they use, the places they feel safe. I know—" She stopped abruptly, her eyes widening as she looked past them down the street. Mercer turned to follow her gaze and felt his hand move instinctively to his gun. 3 men had emerged from the saloon at the far end of the street. Even at this distance, there was something dangerous about the way they moved, a predatory awareness that marked them as more than simple ranch hands or drifters. They stood in a loose triangle, scanning the street with the methodical attention of men looking for something specific. "Those men," Isabella whispered, her voice tight with fear. "They're Corban's. The tall one on the left is called Snake. The one in the middle is Dutch. Not the rancher from yesterday, different Dutch. And the third one is Martinez. They're some of his best trackers." "They followed you here," Vargas said flatly. "I was careful. I swear I was careful." "Not careful enough." Mercer's mind raced through options. They were in the middle of town, with witnesses and Marshal Keaton's authority to consider. A gunfight here would end their mission before it truly began. But letting Corban's men take Isabella, assuming she was telling the truth, would mean losing a valuable source of information and likely sending an innocent woman to her death. The 3 men started walking toward them, their hands resting casually on their gun belts. They weren't drawing yet, weren't making any overtly hostile moves, but the threat was clear in every step. "Get behind us," Mercer told Isabella. "Don't run. Don't make any sudden moves. Just step back and let us handle this." "They'll kill you," she said, but she was already moving, placing Mercer and Vargas between herself and the approaching men. "They will try," Vargas said with that cold smile of his. "But trying and succeeding are different things, no?" The 3 men stopped about 20 feet away. Snake, the tall one, was lean and ropey with muscle, his face tanned dark by the sun. His eyes were pale blue, the color of ice, and they studied Mercer and Vargas with calculating intensity. Dutch was shorter but broader, built like a bull, with scarred knuckles and a nose that had been broken more than once. Martinez was the youngest of the 3, probably no more than 30, but there was a wariness in his eyes that spoke of hard experience. "Morning, gentlemen," Snake said pleasantly. "Fine day for a ride, ain't it?" "It is," Mercer agreed, his voice equally casual, "though a bit early for conversation with strangers." "Oh, we're not interested in conversation with you. It's the lady we're looking for. The one hiding behind you like a scared rabbit." "Oh, the lady is under our protection," Mercer said, "which means you boys should turn around and find somewhere else to be." Snake's smile widened, showing teeth stained yellow from tobacco. "That's real noble of you, stranger, but you don't understand the situation. That woman there, she's stolen property, ran off with money that don't belong to her. We're just here to collect what's ours and bring her back to face justice." "Strange kind of justice," Vargas observed, "that requires 3 armed men to bring in 1 unarmed woman." "She's dangerous," Dutch rumbled, his voice like gravel in a bucket. "Sneaky, can't be too careful." "The only danger here," Mercer said quietly, "is you boys not recognizing when you're outnumbered." That drew surprised laughs from all 3 men. Snake looked genuinely amused. "Outnumbered? Friend, there's 3 of us and 2 of you. And we know you ain't local law. Keaton wouldn't let his deputies dress like drifters. So that makes you either very brave or very stupid. Which is it? Neither. Just realistic. Mercer's hand hadn't moved toward his gun, but his posture had shifted almost imperceptibly, weight balanced on the balls of his feet, ready to move. Beside him, Vargas had gone utterly still in the way a coiled snake goes still before striking. You see, you're making the assumption that you and your friends there are actually the threat in this situation. But what if you're wrong? What if we're the ones you should be worried about? Something in Mercer's tone, some quality of absolute certainty, made Snake's smile falter. His eyes narrowed, reassessing, and Mercer could almost see the calculation happening behind them. 3 against 2 should be easy odds. But something was wrong. Something about these two strangers didn't add up. "Who are you?" Snake asked, his voice losing its mocking edge. "Name's Mercer. This is Vargas. We're bounty hunters out of Arizona territory. And the woman behind us is now a witness under our protection. You try to take her and we'll consider it obstruction of a lawful hunt. I don't think you want that kind of trouble." The mention of Vargas's name had an immediate effect. Martinez went pale, his hand actually moving away from his gun as if the weapon had suddenly become too hot to touch. Even Dutch looked uncertain, his piggy eyes darting between his companions as if seeking guidance. Only Snake held his ground, though his casual confidence had evaporated like morning dew under the desert sun. "Santiago Vargas," he said slowly. "El Santo. I heard you were dead." Many people have heard this. Vargas's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Yet here I stand. Strange how rumors work, no? You're working with the law now?" Snake's voice held disbelief. "You, of all people?" "I work for justice. Sometimes that aligns with the law, sometimes not. Today, it means protecting this woman from men like you." Vargas paused, then added with quiet menace, "So I suggest you walk away. Walk away now, while you still can. Because if shooting starts, I promise you, all 3 of you will be dead before your bodies hit the ground." It wasn't a boast. It was a simple statement of fact, delivered with such utter conviction that even Snake, hardened criminal that he was, felt the truth of it in his bones. Dutch took a step backward. Martinez had already started to turn away. Only Snake held his position, pride warring with survival instinct on his weathered face. "Corban will hear about this," Snake said finally. "He'll know you're hunting him, and he'll be ready." "Good," Mercer said. "Tell him Luke Mercer is coming for him. Tell him it's for the people he killed in that mining camp 3 years ago. Tell him I'll be seeing him real soon." Snake's eyes widened slightly at the mention of the mining camp. Confirmation, if Mercer needed it, that these men knew exactly what their boss had done and probably helped him do it. The tall man spat in the dust, a gesture of contempt that lacked real force behind it. "You're dead men," Snake said. "Both of you. You just don't know it yet." "Perhaps," Vargas said mildly, "but not today. And not by you. Now go, before I lose my patience and we discover whether God reserves a special place in hell for men who threaten women." For a long moment, the street was frozen. 6 people locked in a tableau of tension and potential violence. Then Snake jerked his head at his companions, and the 3 of them turned and walked back toward the saloon, their steps stiff with suppressed anger and bruised pride. Mercer didn't relax until they disappeared inside. Even then, he kept his awareness focused on the saloon doors, ready for treachery. "That could have gone worse," Vargas observed. "Could have gone better too. Now Corban knows we're coming." "He would have learned eventually anyway." Vargas turned to Isabella, who had emerged from behind them, her face pale but composed. You are certain those men were from Corban's gang?" "I'm certain. I cooked for them, washed their clothes, listened to their stories." Snake likes to brag about the people he's killed. Dutch barely talks at all, but he's meaner than he looks. And Martinez, she paused, something like pity crossing her face. Martinez joined the gang to feed his family back in Chihuahua. He's not evil, just desperate and trapped. "Desperate men are often the most dangerous," Mercer said. "They've got nothing to lose and everything to prove." He studied Isabella's face, looking for any sign that her fear had been an act, that she might have orchestrated this confrontation somehow. But all he saw was genuine relief that the encounter had ended without bloodshed. "Those men will report back to Corban, which means we need to move fast before he can relocate or set a trap." "Then you believe me?" Isabella asked. You'll let me help you? Mercer exchanged a long look with Vargas. His partner's expression was skeptical but not hostile, the look of a man willing to be convinced if the evidence warranted it. We'll give you a chance to prove yourself, Mercer said carefully. You ride with us to Las Cruces. You show us where Corban's men might have gone after the raid. If your information checks out, we'll talk about the next steps. But if you're lying to us, if this is some kind of trap, I understand, Isabella said quickly. I know you don't trust me yet. I wouldn't trust me either, but I swear on my sister's grave everything I've told you is true. Every word. The mention of a sister made Mercer think of his own lost family, and something in his chest tightened painfully. He pushed the emotion aside, forcing himself to think tactically rather than personally. You have a horse? He asked. I can get one. Give me 10 minutes. 5, Vargas said flatly. We leave in 5 minutes, with or without you. That encounter has started a clock running. The longer we wait, the more time Corban has to prepare. Isabella nodded and hurried off toward the livery stable, her skirts kicking up small clouds of dust. As soon as she was out of earshot, Vargas turned to Mercer with raised eyebrows. Well, the older man asked, what does your gut tell you about her? That she's either telling the truth or she's the best liar I've ever met. Mercer watched Isabella disappear into the stable. The fear when she saw those men, that was real. You can't fake that kind of visceral reaction. Maybe. Or maybe she is a very good actress. Vargas pulled out his pistols and checked them again, a nervous habit that Mercer had learned meant his partner was thinking hard about something. But the note, that was not fake. I know paper, no ink. That message was written weeks ago, not yesterday. So either she really did steal it from Corban, or someone gave it to her to give to us. Why would someone do that? Because maybe we are not the only ones who want Corban gone. Maybe someone else has reasons to see him dead or captured. Maybe this whole thing is more complicated than we thought. Mercer had been thinking the same thing, had felt the edges of a larger picture trying to come into focus in his mind. The precise timing of the raids, the elegant handwriting on that note, the suggestion of organization and planning beyond what a simple outlaw gang should possess. It all pointed to something bigger, more sophisticated than a group of violent men stealing because they could. If Isabella is telling the truth about someone else planning the raids, Mercer said slowly, then that someone is smart, well-connected, and probably respected in the community. The kind of person who can get information about bank schedules and gold shipments without raising suspicion. And who profits from Corban taking all the risk while they sit safe and clean somewhere, counting their share of the money, Vargas finished. Yes, I have thought this too. Which means we must be very careful who we trust. Even Barrett and the others, they could be involved. Anyone could be. The thought was sobering. Mercer had taken Thomas Barrett at face value, had assumed the banker's anger and frustration were genuine. But what if Barrett himself was part of the scheme? What if the whole meeting yesterday had been theater, a way to keep tabs on anyone getting too close to the truth? We trust no one except each other, Mercer said. We verify everything Isabella tells us before we act on it, and we watch our backs every second of every day. This I can do. Vargas grinned, but there was no humor in it. I have spent my whole life watching my back. It is second nature now, like breathing. Isabella emerged from the stable leading a chestnut mare that looked trail-worn but sturdy. She'd changed clothes while inside, trading her dress for men's work pants and a shirt that fit well enough to suggest she'd had them prepared in advance. Smart, Mercer thought. A woman in a dress couldn't ride hard or move fast when trouble came calling. I'm ready, she said, swinging up into the saddle with practiced ease. Another mark in her favor. She rode like someone who'd spent serious time on horseback, not like a town girl playing at being an outlaw. Then we ride, Mercer said. He mounted his bay, Vargas following suit on his gray. Las Cruces is a full day north. We push hard. We can make it by nightfall. Isabella, you ride between us. Don't fall behind, and if we tell you to do something, you do it immediately without questions. Understood? Understood. They rode out of Esperanza as the sun climbed higher, 3 figures on horseback, heading into country that grew progressively rougher and more unforgiving with each passing mile. The road north was well-traveled but not well-maintained, just packed earth worn smooth by wagon wheels and horse hooves. On either side, The landscape opened up into vast stretches of scrubland punctuated by rock formations that looked like ancient monuments to forgotten gods. For the first hour, they rode in silence, each lost in private thoughts. Mercer used the time to study the terrain, noting landmarks and water sources, building a mental map of the country they moved through. Vargas kept his attention on their back trail, watching for any sign they were being followed, and Isabella simply rode, her face set in an expression of determined concentration. It was Vargas who finally broke the silence. "This sister you mentioned," he said to Isabella, "the one whose grave you swore on. How did she die?" Isabella's hands tightened on her reins, and for a moment Mercer thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was carefully controlled, each word measured and deliberate. "Her name was Maria. She was 2 years younger than me, and beautiful, truly beautiful, not just sister bias. She had this laugh that made everyone around her smile, even when things were hard." Isabella paused, swallowing hard. 6 months ago, she was working as a seamstress in Mesilla. One of Corban's men came to town to buy supplies. He saw her, decided he wanted her. She refused him. So he waited until she was walking home one evening, and she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Mercer felt old, familiar anger rising in his chest, the same fury that had driven him to hunt Corban in the first place. "I'm sorry," Vargas said quietly, and for once his voice held genuine sympathy instead of his usual sardonic edge. "This is a pain I understand. My daughter, I lost her to violence as well. Different circumstances, same result. The emptiness does not go away." "No," Isabella agreed. "It doesn't. But finding the men responsible, making sure they can't hurt anyone else, that helps. Not much, but enough to keep going." "Is that why you joined Corban's gang?" Mercer asked. "To get close to the man who killed your sister?" Isabella's laugh was bitter. "I didn't join. I was taken. After Maria died, I started asking questions, trying to find out which of Corban's men had done it. I asked too loudly, talked to the wrong people. 3 of his gang showed up at my door one night and gave me a choice. Come with them and work for the gang, or die there in my own home. I chose to live. I thought maybe I could escape eventually, or find evidence to bring to the law. I was stupid and naive." "But you did escape," Mercer pointed out. "And you did find evidence, so maybe not so stupid after all." "Maybe." Isabella didn't sound convinced. "Or maybe I just got lucky. If Corban hadn't gotten drunk one night and left that note where I could find it, I'd still be there, cooking his food and cleaning his clothes and waiting for the day he decided I knew too much and needed to disappear." They rode on, the sun climbing toward its zenith, the heat building until the air shimmered and danced above the rocky ground. Mercer rationed water carefully from his canteen, knowing they'd need to make it last until they reached Las Cruces or found a reliable spring. In this country, dehydration could kill faster than bullets. Around midday, they stopped briefly to rest the horses and eat a sparse meal of jerky and hardtack. Vargas climbed a nearby rise to scout the surrounding terrain, while Mercer and Isabella sat in the shade of a large boulder, grateful for even the small relief from the relentless sun. "Can I ask you something?" Isabella said after a few minutes of silence. "You can ask. I might not answer." "Fair enough." She studied his face with open curiosity. "When you told those men you were hunting Corban because of a mining camp, was that true? Did he really kill your family?" Mercer was quiet for a long time, weighing how much to reveal. Finally, he nodded. "My sister Sarah and her family. Her husband Robert was a good man, a skilled carpenter. Their kids, Emma was 6, Thomas was 4. They went to that camp because Robert thought he could make a better life for them there. There was talk of silver in those mountains, dreams of striking it rich. They lasted 6 months before Corban came through." "I'm sorry," Isabella said softly. "Everyone's sorry. Sorry doesn't bring them back." Mercer's voice was flat, emotionless, but his eyes betrayed the depth of feeling he kept locked away. "I spent 3 years tracking rumors, following leads, building a case against Corban piece by piece. Now I'm close enough to smell him, close enough to end this. And when you do, when he's dead or captured and your revenge is complete, what then?" It was a good question, and one Mercer had avoided asking himself for a very long time. What would he do when this hunt was over? What purpose would drive him forward when the purpose that had consumed him for years was finally satisfied? "I'll figure that out when I get there," he said finally. Right now, all that matters is finishing what I started. Vargas returned from his scouting, his expression thoughtful. There is dust on the horizon to the east. Could be cattle drive, could be travelers, could be Corban's men circling around to cut us off before we reach Las Cruces. How far? Mercer asked, instantly alert. Hard to say. 5 miles, maybe 6. They are not moving fast, but they are moving in the right direction to intersect our path if we maintain current speed. Mercer considered their options. They could push the horses harder, try to reach Las Cruces before whoever was making that dust cloud could catch them. But that risked wearing out their mounts, leaving them vulnerable if they needed to run or fight later. Or they could deviate from the main road, take a longer route that would put more distance between them and potential trouble. What do you think? He asked Vargas. I think we assume it is trouble until proven otherwise. We take the eastern fork at Bloody Creek Crossing, add 2 hours to our journey, but avoid the main road entirely. If they are looking for us, they will expect us to take the direct route. Agreed. Mercer turned to Isabella. You know this country? Some. I've never been to Bloody Creek Crossing specifically, but I know the general area. The eastern fork runs through rougher terrain, more rocks, fewer water sources. But it's defensible if we need to make a stand. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. Mercer stood, brushing dust from his pants. Mount up. We've got hard riding ahead, and I want to be well off the main road before whoever's making that dust realizes we're out here. They rode hard for the next 3 hours, pushing the horses as much as they dared without breaking them. The terrain grew progressively rougher, the road giving way to a narrow trail that wound between towering rock formations and across stretches of loose scree that made the horses work for every step. True to Vargas's prediction, they reached Bloody Creek Crossing in the late afternoon, a place where a shallow stream cut through a narrow canyon, its banks marked with old bloodstains that had given the location its grim name. Local legend said 2 families had fought over water rights here 20 years ago, and the dispute had ended with 7 people dead and the creek running red for days. They watered the horses carefully, watching the surrounding ridges for any sign of movement. The canyon walls created natural choke points that would make an excellent ambush site, and Mercer's instincts screamed warnings that kept his hand near his gun. We don't linger here, he said quietly. Fill the canteens and let's move. But even as he spoke, Vargas's hand shot up in warning. The older man's eyes were fixed on the eastern ridge, where a figure had appeared silhouetted against the sky. Then another figure, and another. Within seconds, there were 6 men visible on the ridge, all mounted, all watching the canyon floor where Mercer and his companions stood exposed. Well, Vargas said with grim humor, it seems trouble has found us after all. Mercer's hand moved to his rifle, fingers closing around the worn stock as he calculated angles and distances with the cold precision of a man who'd survived too many ambushes to panic now. The canyon walls rose steep and unforgiving on both sides, offering no easy escape route. Behind them, the trail they'd followed narrowed to a defile barely wide enough for a single horse. Ahead, the stream continued through the canyon for another 100 yards before opening into more defensible terrain. How many? He asked Vargas without taking his eyes off the ridge. 6 on the eastern rim that I can see. Could be more behind the rocks. Vargas had drawn one of his pistols, holding it low against his thigh where it wouldn't catch the sun and give away their readiness. But I think if there were more, they would show themselves. This is meant to intimidate, not to kill. Not yet. Isabella's horse shifted nervously beneath her, picking up on the tension radiating from its rider. That's not all of Corban's men, she said quietly. He travels with at least 15. These must be scouts sent ahead to find us. Or to delay us while the rest circle around, Mercer said. He studied the men on the ridge, noting their positions, their weapons. They weren't making any aggressive moves, just sitting their horses and watching with the patience of men who knew they held the superior position. They want us trapped in this canyon when the main force arrives. Then we disappoint them. Vargas gestured toward the western wall of the canyon, where a narrow game trail switchbacked up the steep slope. That trail there. It is difficult but possible. We climb, we fight from higher ground if fighting comes. Better than being shot like fish in a barrel down here. Mercer considered it. The trail looked treacherous, the kind of path mountain goats used rather than horses. But Vargas was right. Staying in the canyon bottom was suicide if Corban's full gang showed up. At least on higher ground they'd have some tactical advantage, some ability to see what was coming. Isabella, he said, Can you make that climb?" She followed his gaze to the trail, and he saw her throat work as she swallowed hard. But when she answered, her voice was steady. "I can make it. My horse is sure-footed. We'll manage." "Then we go. Now." Before they decide to stop watching and start shooting, Mercer urged his bay toward the western wall, keeping his rifle ready but not obviously aimed at the men above. No point in starting a fight they might be able to avoid. The game trail was even worse up close than it had looked from a distance. The first switchback climbed at an angle steep enough that the horses had to lean into it, their hooves scrabbling for purchase on loose rock. Mercer went first, trusting his gelding's mountain-bred instincts, hearing Isabella's mare behind him and Vargas bringing up the rear. From the ridge above, one of the watching men called out, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. "That's a hard climb you're attempting, friends. Dangerous for man and beast alike. Might be safer to stay down there and talk this out peaceful-like." Mercer didn't bother responding. He focused on the trail, on guiding his horse around the tighter bends, on watching for loose stones that might trigger a slide. Behind him, he heard Isabella's breathing quicken with effort and fear, but she kept moving, kept her mare under control. They were halfway up the canyon wall when the first shot rang out. The bullet struck rock 3 feet to Mercer's left, spraying fragments of stone that stung his face. His horse reared, nearly losing its footing on the narrow trail, and for one heart-stopping moment, Mercer thought they were going over the edge. He fought the gelding down, forcing it forward, even as more shots echoed through the canyon. "They're shooting to spook the horses, not to kill," Vargas shouted from below. "They want us to fall, save them the trouble of a real fight." "Keep moving," Mercer called back. "Don't stop, don't look down, just keep moving." Another shot, closer this time, and Isabella's mare screamed in terror. Mercer twisted in his saddle in time to see the horse's rear hooves slip off the edge of the trail. Isabella threw herself forward, clinging to the mare's neck as the animal fought desperately for balance. Vargas reacted with the speed of a striking snake. He was off his own horse in an instant, grabbing the mare's bridle and hauling with all his considerable strength. The horse found purchase, lunged forward, and suddenly they were all moving again, climbing higher while bullets whined off the rocks around them. The men on the eastern ridge had stopped shooting now, apparently satisfied they'd made their point. Mercer could hear them laughing, could imagine them congratulating each other on putting the fear into these stupid strangers who thought they could hunt Rafael Corban and live to tell about it. Let them laugh, Mercer thought grimly. Let them think they'd won this round. He'd remember their faces, and when the time came for settling accounts, he'd make sure they understood the price of underestimating him. The final stretch of trail was the worst, a near vertical climb over broken rock that had the horses scrambling and sliding, their breath coming in labored gasps. But Mercer's gelding had been bred for mountain work, and it tackled the challenge with stubborn determination that he couldn't help but admire. Isabella's mare, shaken but game, followed close behind, and Vargas's gray, as reliable as its owner, brought up the rear with steady certainty. They crested the western rim just as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and blood red. Mercer dismounted immediately, dropping to his belly near the edge to look down into the canyon they'd just escaped. The 6 men who'd been watching from the eastern ridge were gone. In their place, emerging from the canyon's northern end, came a much larger group. At least a dozen riders moving in tight formation, their horses fresh, and their weapons visible even from this distance. "Corban?" Mercer asked as Isabella crawled up beside him. She studied the approaching riders for a long moment before shaking her head. "I don't see him, but that's definitely his gang. The man in front, the one on the black stallion, that's Snake again. He must have ridden ahead after we left Esperanza, gathered reinforcements, and set up this trap." "Smart," Vargas observed from Mercer's other side. "Smarter than most bandits. This Snake, he thinks like a soldier, not like a simple outlaw." "He was a soldier," Isabella said. "Cavalry, before he deserted and joined up with Corban. He knows tactics, knows how to plan an ambush. He's dangerous." Mercer watched the riders below spread out, searching the canyon floor for tracks. It wouldn't take them long to find the trail and realize their quarry had escaped upward. The question was whether they'd pursue up that treacherous path or try to find another route to higher ground. The answer came quickly. Snake dismounted and walked to the base of the game trail, studying it for a long moment before returning to his horse. Even from this distance, Mercer could see him shaking his head, gesturing to his men. The path was too dangerous for a large group, especially as darkness approached. They'd have to find another way. They will circle north, Vargas predicted. Look for a gentler slope. Try to cut us off before we can reach Las Cruces. We have maybe 2 hours head start if we ride hard. The horses need rest, Isabella said. If we push them now, after that climb, we risk them breaking down completely. She was right, but Mercer knew they couldn't afford to stop, not with Corban's gang this close, this determined. He stood, brushing dust from his clothes, trying to think through the exhaustion that was starting to cloud his judgment. We compromise, he said finally. We walk the horses for an hour, let them recover while we put distance between us and that canyon. Then we ride at a sustainable pace, not a full gallop, but steady progress. We navigate by starlight if we have to. Las Cruces is still our best bet for shelter and reinforcements. Reinforcements? Vargas raised an eyebrow. I thought we were working alone. We are. But Las Cruces has a marshal's office, has deputies. Even if we can't trust them completely, Corban won't risk a full assault on a town with law enforcement. It gives us breathing room to regroup and plan our next move. They led the horses northeast, following the ridgeline until it began to slope more gently downward toward the flatter country beyond. The sun continued its descent, and with it came the blessed relief of cooling temperatures. Night in the desert could be dangerously cold, but right now Mercer welcomed the chill after the brutal heat of the day. As they walked, Isabella moved up alongside him, her face troubled in the fading light. I'm sorry, she said quietly. This is my fault. If I hadn't approached you in Esperanza, if I just kept running on my own, Corban's men wouldn't be hunting you. You could have taken your time, planned a proper approach instead of being forced into running battles and desperate escapes. You didn't force anything, Mercer said. We chose to let you ride with us. We chose to protect you from Snake and his friends. Those were our decisions, and we stand by them. But why? You don't know me. You have no reason to trust me or care what happens to me. For all you know, I could be leading you into an even bigger trap. Mercer glanced at her, seeing genuine confusion in her eyes. It occurred to him that Isabella had probably spent so long surrounded by violent, selfish men that simple decency had become incomprehensible to her. My sister Sarah used to say that the measure of a person isn't what they do when everything's easy, he said. It's what they do when doing the right thing costs them something. You escaped Corban's gang, risked your life to gather evidence against him, and then came to us, even knowing we might not believe you. That takes courage. It deserves respect. Or stupidity, Isabella said with a bitter half-smile. Sometimes the line between courage and stupidity is thinner than we'd like to admit. Mercer looked ahead to where Vargas was leading his gray along the ridge, the older man's posture alert despite the long day. Vargas and I, we've both lost people we loved to senseless violence. We both spent years hunting the men responsible. Maybe that makes us qualified to recognize when someone else is fighting the same battle we are. Maybe it just makes us suckers for a sad story. Either way, you're with us now. We see this through together. They walked in silence for a while. The only sounds, the soft crunch of hooves on rocky ground, and the occasional cry of a nightbird announcing the coming darkness. Stars began to appear overhead, first a few brave pioneers, and then whole constellations emerging from the deepening blue. It was full dark when they finally remounted. The horses rested enough to continue at a careful walk. Mercer navigated by the North Star and his sense of the terrain, trusting his instincts to keep them moving in the right direction. Vargas ranged ahead, scouting the path, while Isabella rode close to Mercer's side. The night deepened around them, vast and silent except for the sounds of their passage. In this darkness, with danger behind them and uncertainty ahead, Mercer felt the strange intimacy that comes from shared hardship. These two people, a Mexican bounty hunter with a violent reputation and a young woman fleeing her sister's murderers, were his companions now, his allies in a fight that seemed to grow more complicated with every passing hour. Tell me about the note, Mercer said to Isabella after they'd ridden for perhaps an hour. The one you showed us this morning. Where exactly did you find it? In Corban's saddlebag. He was drunk, celebrating after the Las Cruces raid. He'd taken more gold than expected, and he was in a generous mood, if you can call a murderer getting drunk and shooting at bottles generous. He passed out in his tent, and I was supposed to clean up after him. That's when I saw the saddlebag open, papers spilling out. Most were old wanted posters, maps, worthless things. But that note, it was different. The paper was expensive, the handwriting too refined for an outlaw's scrawl. Did you recognize the handwriting? Isabella shook her head. I've never seen it before, but I've thought about it every day since. Who writes like that? Who has access to bank schedules and gold shipment information? It has to be someone with connections, someone respectable. Someone like a banker, Vargas said from ahead, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. He dropped back to rejoin them, his scouting apparently complete. Someone like Thomas Barrett, perhaps, or one of the other men at that meeting. The suggestion hung in the air like smoke. Mercer had considered the possibility before, but hearing Vargas voice it made it seem more real, more plausible. Barrett lost $80,000 in the Esperanza raid, Mercer said. Why would he orchestrate a robbery of his own bank? Insurance, Isabella suggested. Or maybe he didn't lose as much as he claimed. Maybe some of that money is hidden away, and he reported more stolen than actually was. Who would know? Who would check his records when everyone's so focused on catching the outlaws? It was a disturbing possibility, and one that fit uncomfortably well with the facts. If Barrett was involved in the robberies, it would explain how the gang had such perfect information about when to strike. It would explain the precision of the timing, the careful selection of targets. And it would mean that Mercer and Vargas had walked into the banker's office yesterday and laid out their entire plan to one of the criminals they were hunting. We can't trust anyone in Esperanza, Mercer said grimly. Not until we know for certain who's dirty and who's clean. That means when we get to Las Cruces, we keep our heads down, gather information, and don't contact the local authorities unless we have no choice. Agreed, Vargas said. We find a place to hole up, rest the horses, and figure out our next move. Maybe we lean on some of Corban's captured men, make them tell us where their boss is hiding. You think any of them were captured after the Las Cruces raid? Isabella asked. There is always someone captured, someone too slow to run, or too drunk to fight, or simply unlucky. We find that person, we ask them questions, and I am very good at asking questions. The way Vargas said it made Mercer's skin crawl slightly, even though he knew his partner's methods got results. There was a darkness in Santiago Vargas that came from years of hunting evil men, a willingness to use their own tactics against them that sometimes worried Mercer. How many times could you stare into the abyss before it started staring back? How many acts of brutality could you commit in the name of justice before the line between you and the criminals blurred beyond recognition? But those were philosophical questions for safer times. Right now they had more immediate concerns, like survival. They rode through the night, stopping only once to water the horses at a small spring that bubbled up from between two rocks. The water was cold and clean, tasting of minerals and stone, and they drank deeply before refilling their canteens and moving on. Dawn found them on a rise overlooking the town of Las Cruces, a collection of adobe buildings and wooden structures spread out in the valley below. Even from this distance, Mercer could see signs of activity, smoke rising from chimneys, people moving through the streets, the normal rhythms of a frontier town waking to face another day. We go in separately, Mercer decided. Isabella first, alone. You find a boarding house, get a room, and stay out of sight. Vargas and I will come in an hour later, stable the horses, and find our own accommodations. We meet tonight after dark at... Where, Isabella? Somewhere quiet, somewhere we can talk without being overheard. Isabella thought for a moment. There's a small church on the eastern edge of town, old mission building, mostly abandoned now. The locals think it's haunted because a priest was killed there years ago. No one goes near it after sunset. Perfect. We meet there 2 hours after sunset. That gives us all day to rest, listen to local gossip, and find out if anyone from Corban's gang was captured during the raid. And if someone was captured? Isabella asked. Then tonight gets interesting, Vargas said with that predatory smile of his. Very interesting indeed. They descended into the valley as the sun climbed higher, the heat building quickly despite the early hour. True to their plan, Isabella rode ahead alone, entering the town from the south, while Mercer and Vargas waited on the ridge. She looked small and vulnerable from this distance, one lone rider approaching a town that might hold friends or enemies in equal measure. You think she will betray us? Vargas asked quietly, as they watched her disappear into the streets below. No, Mercer said, surprising himself with how certain he felt. I think she's exactly what she claims to be. a woman trying to survive in a world that's taken everything from her. I think she wants Corban dead as badly as we do, maybe more. And I think if we're smart, we'll use that desire to our advantage. You're beginning to think like me, Vargas observed. This is either very good or very dangerous. Probably both. They gave Isabella her hour, using the time to scout the approaches to town and identify potential escape routes if things went wrong. Las Cruces was larger than Esperanza, which meant more places to hide but also more places for enemies to lurk. The main street ran east-west, lined with businesses and saloons. Side streets branched off in rough grid patterns, leading to residential areas and the stockyards on the northern edge of town. The marshal's office sat prominently in the center of town, a sturdy brick building with barred windows and a hanging sign that proclaimed law and order in faded letters. Mercer studied it carefully, noting the sight lines, the distance to the nearest cover. If they had to move fast, that office could be either sanctuary or death trap, depending on whose side the local law was on. Finally, when the hour had passed, they rode down into Las Cruces. Mercer kept his hat pulled low, his posture relaxed despite the tension coiling in his gut. They were just two more drifters passing through, nothing to attract special attention. The town was busy enough that no one gave them more than cursory glances as they made their way to the livery stable. The stable master was an older Mexican man with kind eyes and hands gnarled by a lifetime of hard work. He quoted them a fair price for boarding the horses, threw in fresh hay and grain without being asked, and didn't inquire about their business. Mercer appreciated the discretion and tipped him extra for it. "You hear anything about the bank robbery here?" Mercer asked casually as he settled the bill. "We heard about it down in Esperanza. Figured we'd avoid the town entirely until things settled down." The stable master spat into the dust. "Bad business, that. Very bad. They came in the afternoon bold as you please, shot the guard, took everything from the vault, and rode out before the marshal could organize a response. They say it was Rafael Corban's gang, but nobody saw Corban himself. Just his men, wearing those bandanas they used to hide their faces. Anyone catch them? Any of the gang captured?" "One." The stable master's expression darkened. "Stupido kid named Martinez. His horse went lame during the escape, couldn't keep up with the others. They left him behind like he was nothing. Marshal has him locked up tight, waiting for the territorial judge to arrive for trial." Mercer felt his pulse quicken. Martinez, the same man Isabella had identified that morning in Esperanza, the one she'd said joined the gang to feed his family, the one who might be desperate enough to talk if offered the right incentive. "That's good," Mercer said neutrally. "At least they got somebody. Where'd they catch him?" "Just outside town, on the North Road. He tried to surrender peaceful, but some of the townsmen wanted to string him up right there. Marshal Dawson stopped them, said the law would handle it proper. Some folks weren't happy about that, but Dawson's a hard man when he needs to be. Wouldn't let mob justice take over." "Sounds like a good marshal," Vargas said. "He is. Fair but firm, my wife says. He'll make sure that Martinez hangs legal, with a trial and everything." The stable master shook his head. "Though between you and me, the kid don't look like no hardened criminal. He cried like a baby when they locked him up, kept saying he was sorry, that he never wanted to hurt nobody." Mercer exchanged glances with Vargas. A young man, frightened and remorseful, sitting in a cell and waiting for a rope around his neck. That was exactly the kind of prisoner who might be willing to trade information for clemency. The question was how to get to him without alerting the marshal or drawing attention to themselves. They left the stable and found a small hotel on a quiet side street, paying cash for 2 rooms on the second floor that overlooked the rear alley. The rooms were basic but clean, with narrow beds and washstands and windows that opened wide enough to climb through if necessary. Mercer approved, always good to have a backup exit. After washing the trail dust from his face and hands, Mercer lay down on the bed and tried to rest. His body was exhausted from the long night ride and the tension of constant vigilance, but his mind refused to settle. Too many questions, too many variables. Who had written that note to Corban? How deep did the corruption go? Could they trust Marshal Dawson, or was he part of the conspiracy? And most importantly, where was Rafael Corban himself? Sleep finally claimed him in brief, fitful snatches, bringing dreams of his sister's face and the sound of children laughing, which always morphed into screams and gunfire before jerking him awake again. The afternoon crawled past with agonizing slowness. Mercer ventured out once to buy food and gather information, listening to conversations in the general store and the saloon. The town was still on edge from the raid, everyone jumpy and suspicious of strangers. He heard wild speculation about where Corban was hiding, ranging from Mexico to the mountains to elaborate underground bunkers. No one seemed to have real information, just fear and anger looking for a target. He returned to the hotel as the sun began its descent, finding Vargas already awake and cleaning his weapons with methodical precision. "Learn anything useful?" the older man asked without looking up from his work. "Town's scared. They want blood, preferably Corban's, but they'll settle for Martinez if that's all they can get. Marshal's keeping tight security at the jail, won't let anyone near the prisoner except his deputies. And word is the territorial judge might not arrive for another week, which means Martinez is sitting in that cell with plenty of time to think about his next stretching. A week is good for us. Gives us time to work." Vargas reassembled his pistol with practiced ease, the components clicking together smoothly. "We need to speak with this Martinez, find out what he knows about Corban's location, about the planning of these raids. But getting into that jail without the marshal knowing, that will be difficult. Not if we have help from someone the marshal trusts." Vargas looked up sharply. "You have an idea?" "Maybe. It's risky, and it depends on reading people correctly. But it might work." Mercer outlined his plan, watching Vargas's scarred face for reactions. When he finished, the older man was quiet for a long moment. "It is clever," Vargas finally admitted. "Also completely insane and likely to get us killed if it goes wrong. I approve. High praise coming from you. I am serious, amigo. If we do this, we commit completely. No hesitation, no second guessing. We walk in like we own the place, and we do not leave until we have what we came for." "Understood. We'll discuss it with Isabella tonight, see if she has any other insights that might help." Mercer checked his pocket watch. Still another hour until their meeting at the abandoned church. "You ready for this? For all of it?" Vargas smiled, and for once there was something almost gentle in his expression. "Luke, my friend, I have been ready for this fight since the day my daughter died. Every moment since then has been preparation, building toward the chance to take men like Corban off this earth permanently. So yes, I am ready." The sun set in a blaze of crimson and gold, painting the sky with colors that reminded Mercer of blood and fire. They left the hotel separately, taking different routes through the darkening streets toward the eastern edge of town where the old mission waited. The church was exactly as Isabella had described, a small adobe structure with a crumbling bell tower and windows that gaped empty like the eye sockets of a skull. Weeds grew thick around its foundation, and the wooden door hung askew on rusted hinges. Local legend or not, the place had an unsettling quality that made even Mercer's pragmatic mind conjure thoughts of ghosts and restless spirits. Isabella was already inside when they arrived, sitting on one of the few remaining pews near the front. Moonlight streaming through the broken roof illuminated her face, making her look younger and more vulnerable than she had on the trail. "Any trouble?" Mercer asked quietly, his voice echoing slightly in the empty space. "None. I kept to my room most of the day, only went out once for food. No one paid me any attention." She stood as they approached. "Did you learn anything?" "Martinez is in the jail, waiting for trial. The marshal's keeping him under tight guard, but from what we heard, the kid's terrified. Crying, apologizing, acting like he never wanted to be part of the gang in the first place." "He didn't," Isabella confirmed. "Martinez was always the weak link. He'd send most of his share of the robberies back to his family in Mexico. He hated the violence, hated what they did. But Corban wouldn't let him leave, said anyone who tried to quit the gang would be hunted down and killed along with their families. Martinez was trapped." "Then he might be willing to help us," Mercer said. "If we can convince him we're offering a way out, a chance to save himself and protect his family." "How do you plan to get to him?" Isabella asked. "The jail is locked up tight. Marshal Dawson doesn't trust anyone after the raid." Mercer explained his plan, watching her face as he laid out the details. When he finished, she was shaking her head. "It's too dangerous. Too many things could go wrong." "You have a better idea?" She was quiet, thinking. Finally, she sighed. "No, I don't. But if we're going to do this, we need to do it soon. Snake and the others won't give up. They'll be coming to Las Cruces, looking for me and for you. We don't have much time. Tomorrow night, Mercer decided. That gives us 1 day to prepare, to scout the jail properly, to make sure we know exactly what we're walking into. We do this right, or we don't do it at all. They spent the next hour going over details, refining the plan, identifying potential problems, and working out solutions. By the time they left the church, moving separately back into the sleeping town, Mercer felt as prepared as he was going to get. But as he lay in his hotel bed that night, staring at the ceiling and listening to the sounds of Las Cruces settling into uneasy sleep around him, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something. Some crucial piece of the puzzle that would make everything else make sense. The note in elegant handwriting, the precise timing of the raids, the suggestion of a mastermind pulling strings from the shadows. And now a frightened young man sitting in a jail cell, holding information that might unravel the entire conspiracy. Tomorrow night they'd have their answers. Tomorrow night they'd learn what Martinez knew, and the hunt for Rafael Corban would enter its final deadly phase. Mercer closed his eyes and let exhaustion finally claim him. His last conscious thought, a prayer to the universe that they'd all live long enough to see justice done. The day that followed passed with the surreal slowness of time before violence, each hour stretching like taffy until Mercer thought he might go mad from the waiting. He spent the morning mapping the area around the jail, committing every alley and doorway to memory, noting which buildings had lights burning late and which stood dark. The marshal's office sat on a corner lot with clear sight lines in all directions. Good for security, terrible for anyone trying an approach unseen. Vargas used his time differently, drifting through saloons and gambling halls with the easy familiarity of a man comfortable in rough company. He came back to the hotel in early afternoon with information gleaned from loose tongues and looser morals. Martinez talks in his sleep, Vargas reported, sitting on the edge of Mercer's bed while his partner cleaned his rifle. The deputy who guards the night shift says the kid has nightmares, calls out names. One name in particular, Clara. The deputy thinks it is a sweetheart, someone Martinez left behind in Mexico. Could be, Mercer said, running an oiled cloth down the rifle barrel. Or could be something else entirely. Did the deputy say anything else? Only that Marshal Dawson is a hard man, but not cruel. He brings Martinez food himself sometimes, talks to him about making peace with his fate. The marshal believes in law, believes in proper trials and proper justice. This will work in our favor if we play it right, or get us both shot if we play it wrong. Mercer set the rifle aside and met Vargas's dark eyes. You don't have to be part of this, Santiago. This isn't your fight the way it's mine. You could walk away right now and I wouldn't blame you. Vargas's scarred face split into a grin. And miss all the fun? No, my friend. I told you before, we finish what we start. Besides, someone needs to watch your back. You are too trusting for this kind of work. Too willing to believe the best in people. And you're too willing to believe the worst. Perhaps. But I'm still alive to argue about it, which suggests my approach has merit. Vargas stood, stretching his back with a series of small pops. Tonight we take a great risk. We walk into the lion's den and ask him politely to open his mouth so we may count his teeth. But if it works, if this Martinez gives us what we need, then we will be one step closer to ending Corban forever. And if the mastermind behind the robberies is who I'm starting to think it is, we'll need more than Martinez's testimony to bring them down. We'll need proof, hard evidence that can't be explained away or buried. Then we find it, or we create it. Vargas's smile turned predatory. There are many ways to make truth visible, Luke. Not all of them are pleasant, but they are effective. They parted ways after that, each retreating to their own preparations. Mercer wrote a letter, carefully worded, deliberately vague, and sealed it in an envelope addressed to Marshal Keaton back in Esperanza. If things went wrong tonight, if he and Vargas didn't survive, at least someone would know what they'd discovered. He left the letter with the hotel clerk with instructions to mail it if they didn't return by morning. The sun finally surrendered to darkness, and with it came the cool desert night that made the heat of the day feel like a distant memory. Mercer dressed carefully in his cleanest clothes, checking his appearance in the small mirror above the washstand. He needed to look respectable, trustworthy, the kind of man a marshal might believe. Vargas knocked on his door precisely at the appointed hour. The older man had also cleaned up, his usually wild hair slicked back, his vest brushed free of trail dust. They looked like successful businessmen, or perhaps lawyers, certainly not like bounty hunters planning to break into a jail. "Ready?" Vargas asked. "As I'll ever be." They walked through the quiet streets of Las Cruces, their boots echoing on the wooden boardwalks. Lights burned in windows, families settling in for the evening, unaware that two strangers were about to set events in motion that would shake their town to its foundations. The marshal's office glowed with lamplight, warm and inviting despite the iron bars on the windows. Through the glass, Mercer could see a man sitting at a desk, paperwork spread before him. Marshal Dawson was younger than Mercer had expected, perhaps 40, with a clean-shaven face and intelligent eyes that looked up sharply when Mercer pushed open the door. "Help you, gentlemen?" Dawson's hand rested casually near the gun on his hip, not threatening, but ready. A professional's caution. Mercer removed his hat, holding it respectfully in both hands. "Marshal Dawson, my name is Luke Mercer. This is my associate, Santiago Vargas. We're bounty hunters working on the Rafael Corban case, and we need to speak with you about your prisoner Martinez." Dawson's eyes narrowed. "Bounty hunters? You're the ones I heard about from Esperanza, the ones who made a deal with Barrett and his banker friends. News travels fast. It does when armed men start making waves in my territory." Dawson leaned back in his chair, studying them both with the careful attention of a man who'd learned to read danger in the set of a stranger's shoulders. "What do you want with Martinez? He's my prisoner, waiting trial for his part in the bank robbery. I'm not handing him over to bounty hunters for some reward money." "We don't want the reward," Mercer said. "We want information. Martinez was part of Corban's gang, which means he knows things, where they hole up, how they plan their raids, who gives them orders. He could help us find Corban and end this reign of terror permanently." "And you think he'll just tell you out of the goodness of his heart?" Dawson's tone was skeptical. "From what I've seen, Martinez is scared out of his mind, but he's not stupid. He talks. He signs his own death warrant. Corban doesn't forgive betrayal." "Which is why we're offering him protection," Vargas said smoothly. "We have connections with federal authorities, people who can relocate Martinez and his family somewhere safe. Give him a new identity, a fresh start. All he has to do is cooperate." It was a lie, of course. They had no such connections, no ability to offer witness protection. But it was a believable lie, the kind of offer that might appeal to a desperate young man facing the gallows. Dawson wasn't buying it. Federal authorities don't work with bounty hunters. They have their own marshals, their own investigators. If you really had that kind of backing, you'd have proper credentials, official papers. You'd be wearing badges, not civilian clothes. Mercer had anticipated this objection. He reached slowly into his vest pocket, moving carefully so Dawson wouldn't perceive it as a threat, and withdrew a folded document. He'd spent 2 hours that afternoon forging it, using official-looking seals purchased from a stationer and careful penmanship that mimicked government correspondence. "We operate under special circumstances," Mercer said, handing the document to Dawson. "The territorial governor wants this handled quietly, without the public spectacle of a formal investigation. Too many important people are nervous about what Corban might reveal under interrogation. We're the compromise, deniable assets who can get results without embarrassing anyone politically connected." Dawson unfolded the paper and read it carefully. Mercer watched his face, trying to gauge whether the forgery was convincing. The marshal's expression gave nothing away, remaining professionally neutral as he scanned the lines. Finally, Dawson refolded the document and handed it back. "This is very official looking. Very impressive. It's also complete horseshit." Mercer's hand moved toward his gun, but Dawson held up a calming hand. "Relax, I'm not calling you out. I'm just pointing out that I wasn't born yesterday, and I know a forgery when I see one. The seal's wrong. Territorial documents use a different design. And the signature at the bottom? That's not the governor's handwriting. I've seen his actual signature on pardon requests." For a long moment, the office was silent, except for the ticking of a clock on the wall. Mercer calculated distances, angles, wondering if they could fight their way out if this went bad. Beside him, Vargas had gone utterly still in the way he did before violence erupted. Then Dawson smiled, and it transformed his face from stern lawman to something almost friendly. "But here's the thing," the marshal continued. "I don't actually care that your credentials are fake. I care about results. I care about stopping Corban and his gang from terrorizing this territory. And if you two are serious about hunting him down, then maybe we can help each other. Mercer felt the tension drain from his shoulders. You'd let us talk to Martinez? Better than that. I'll sit in on the conversation, make sure you don't rough him up or make promises you can't keep. But if Martinez is willing to cooperate, if he gives you actionable intelligence about Corban's location or operations, then I'll support your hunt. I'll even provide backup if you need it, within reason. Why? Vargas asked bluntly. Why help us when we just tried to deceive you? Dawson stood and walked to the window, looking out at his town with the weary expression of a man carrying too much responsibility on his shoulders. Because I'm tired, he said simply. Tired of watching good people lose everything to outlaws who strike and disappear like ghosts. Tired of the limitations of legal procedure that let criminals slip through loopholes and technicalities. Tired of being the only thing standing between chaos and civilization in a territory that's barely got enough law to fill a thimble. He turned back to face them. You're not legal, you're not official, and you're probably more dangerous than the men you hunt. But if you can end this, if you can bring Corban to justice when the law can't, then I'll look the other way and let you do what needs doing. It was the most honest thing Mercer had heard from a lawman in years, and it earned Dawson a measure of respect that no badge or title could have commanded. Then let's talk to Martinez, Mercer said. Let's see if he's ready to save himself. Dawson led them through a heavy door into the back of the building where 3 cells waited, iron bars and stone walls designed to hold the territory's worst. 2 cells stood empty, their doors hanging open. In the third, a young man sat on a narrow cot, his head in his hands. Martinez looked up as they entered, and Mercer saw immediately what the stable master had meant about him not looking like a hardened criminal. He was barely out of his teens, with soft features and eyes reddened from crying. His hands shook where they gripped the edge of the cot, and his breathing came shallow and quick, the signs of a man consumed by fear. Martinez, Dawson said, his voice gentler than Mercer had heard it before. These men want to talk to you. They're hunting Corban, and they think you might be able to help them. You willing to listen to what they have to say? The young man's eyes darted between Mercer and Vargas, looking for threats, for judgment. What he saw seemed to give him no comfort. They'll kill me, Martinez whispered. Corban's men. They'll find out I talked, and they'll kill me and my family. My mother, my little sisters. They'll all die because of me. Not if Corban's dead first, Mercer said, stepping closer to the bars. Not if we end him before he can hurt anyone else. That's what we're offering you, Martinez, a chance to stop running, stop being afraid. Help us find Corban, and this nightmare ends. You don't understand. He's everywhere. He knows everything. Even if you kill him, there are others, people in positions of power who protect him, who profit from what he does. You can't fight all of them. People in positions of power, Vargas repeated, exchanging glances with Mercer. What people? Give us names. Martinez shook his head violently. I don't know names. I only know what I heard, what the others whispered about when they thought I wasn't listening. There's someone important, someone respected, who tells Corban where to strike, when to attack. They provide information about bank schedules, gold shipments, guard rotations. In return, they get a share of the take. How much of a share? Mercer asked. Half. Corban keeps the other half for himself and the men. But the real power, the real control, it all comes from this other person. Corban's just the weapon. The brains are somewhere else. This confirmed what Mercer and Vargas had suspected, but hearing it from someone inside the organization made it real in a way that speculation couldn't match. Did you ever see messages between Corban and this person? Mercer pressed. Letters, notes, anything that might help us identify them? I saw notes sometimes, beautiful handwriting, expensive paper. Corban couldn't read well, so he'd have one of the smarter men read them to him. They always burned the notes afterward, just like the messages said to do. But one time, Martinez paused, his face twisting with the effort of memory. One time I saw an envelope before they burned it. It had a name on the return address. A woman's name, Clara something. I only saw it for a second before Snake grabbed it and threw it in the fire. Clara. The same name Martinez called out in his nightmares, according to the deputy, but not a sweetheart in Mexico. Something else entirely. Clara who? Vargas demanded. What was the last name? I don't remember. It was a common name, something English, Brown or Barrett or... Martinez's eyes suddenly went wide. Barrett, Clara Barrett. That was it. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Clara Barrett, Thomas Barrett's wife, the respected banker's spouse whom Mercer had never even considered as a suspect. It made a horrible kind of sense. She'd have access to her husband's files, knowledge of bank operations and schedules. She'd be above suspicion, able to move through society gathering information without anyone questioning her motives. And if she was careful, if she used intermediaries and burned her correspondence, she could orchestrate the entire operation without ever directly touching the crimes. "You're certain?" Mercer asked, his voice tight. "Clara Barrett?" "I'm certain about the name. Whether it's the same Clara Barrett who lives in Esperanza, I don't know. But how many Clara Barretts can there be in this territory?" Dawson had gone pale. Thomas Barrett's wife. The woman who organizes charity events and ladies' socials. You're telling me she's the mastermind behind a gang of bank robbers? "It would explain everything," Mercer said, his mind racing through implications. The precise timing, the perfect information, the ability to stay one step ahead of the law. She'd know exactly what her husband was doing to investigate the robberies, could warn Corban away from any traps. She's been playing both sides perfectly. "But why?" Dawson asked. "Barrett's rich, successful. His wife wants for nothing. Why risk everything to steal money they don't even need?" "Maybe it's not about the money," Vargas suggested. "Maybe it is about power, control, the thrill of getting away with something impossible." He looked at Martinez through the bars. "What else do you know? Where does Corban hide? Where would he go if he knew someone was hunting him?" Martinez hesitated, loyalty and self-preservation warring on his face. Finally, self-preservation won. "There's a place. An old mining camp in the mountains northwest of here, abandoned for years. Corban uses it as a base when he's operating in this area. Defensible position, good sightlines, fresh water from a spring. He feels safe there." "How many men does he have with him?" Mercer asked. 15, maybe 20. The number changes as people join or leave. But his core group, Snake, Dutch, and about a dozen others, they're loyal to the death. "They'll fight hard if you come for him." "Let them fight," Vargas said coldly. "We will fight harder." Mercer turned to Dawson. "We need to move fast. If Clara Barrett suspects we're onto her, she'll warn Corban or disappear herself. We ride for that mining camp tonight before word can spread." "And what about Martinez?" Dawson gestured to the prisoner. "He's cooperated. He deserves consideration for that." "I'll write a letter to the territorial judge recommending leniency," Mercer said. "Beyond that, it's out of my hands. But Martinez, you've done the right thing here. You've chosen the side of justice over the side of fear. That takes courage." The young man didn't look courageous. He looked terrified and small and completely lost. But he nodded, accepting the praise for what it was, a small comfort in the face of uncertain fate. They left the jail an hour later with detailed directions to the mining camp and Dawson's reluctant blessing for their hunt. The marshal had wanted to organize a proper posse, gather deputies and approach with overwhelming force. Mercer had talked him out of it, arguing that a large group would be spotted miles away and give Corban time to scatter his men or set an ambush. Better to go in quiet, take them by surprise. Isabella was waiting at the abandoned church when they arrived, her face anxious in the moonlight. "Well?" she asked as they approached. "Did Martinez talk?" "He talked," Mercer confirmed. "And what he said changes everything. We know who's behind the robberies, who's been feeding information to Corban and orchestrating the entire operation." "Who?" "Clara Barrett, the banker's wife." Isabella's reaction was immediate and visceral. Her face went white, and she actually staggered back a step as if she'd been struck. "No," she whispered. "It can't be. Not her." "You know her?" Vargas asked sharply. "I've seen her in Esperanza before all this started. She came to the dress shop where my sister worked, ordered expensive gowns, and treated the seamstresses like they were beneath her notice. Maria said she was cold, calculating. Said there was something wrong behind her eyes, like she was always thinking 3 steps ahead of everyone else." Isabella's hands clenched into fists. "If she's responsible, if she's the one who set all this in motion, then she's as guilty as the man who pulled the trigger on my sister." "More guilty," Mercer said grimly. "Corban's a rabid dog, violent and cruel. But Clara Barrett, she's the one who pointed that dog at innocent people and told it to attack. She's the one who profits while others suffer and die. Then we make her pay, Isabella said, her voice hard as stone. We end Corban, and then we expose her for what she is. We make sure the whole territory knows what she's done. First, we need proof, Mercer cautioned. Martinez's testimony helps, but it's not enough. We need documents, correspondence, something that directly links her to the crimes. Otherwise, it's the word of a convicted outlaw against a respected society woman. We know which one a jury would believe. Corban will have evidence, Vargas said. Men like him always keep insurance, something to protect themselves if their partners betray them. We find his hideout. We find the proof we need. They spent the next hour planning their approach to the mining camp. According to Martinez's directions, it was a hard 4-hour ride into mountain country, following old trails that were barely more than game paths. The camp itself sat in a box canyon with only one entrance, which made it defensible but also meant they couldn't sneak in undetected. We go in at dawn, Mercer decided, when they'll be tired from night watch, maybe careless. We hit fast and hard, don't give them time to organize a defense. 3 against 20, Vargas observed. I have faced worse odds, but not by much. We don't have to fight all of them. We just need to get to Corban and whatever evidence he's keeping. Everything else is secondary. Isabella loaded her small pistol with steady hands, checking the cylinder with the care of someone who'd learned the hard way that a misfiring gun could mean death. I'm coming with you, she said before either man could object. Don't try to talk me out of it. This is my fight too. My sister's blood is on Corban's hands just like your family's blood is on his, Luke. I have a right to see this through. Mercer wanted to argue, wanted to tell her to stay safe in town while he and Vargas handled the dangerous work. But looking at her face, at the determination and barely controlled rage burning in her eyes, he knew she wouldn't accept being left behind. And truthfully, he understood the need. Some battles couldn't be won by proxy. Some justice had to be claimed in person. You stay behind us, he said finally. You don't take unnecessary risks, and if we tell you to run, you run. Agreed? Agreed. They left Las Cruces in the deepest part of night, when even the saloons had closed and the streets lay empty and silent. 3 riders heading into darkness, carrying weapons and determination in equal measure, riding toward a confrontation that would end in blood and fire. The trail climbed steadily into the mountains, the air growing cooler and thinner as they gained elevation. Stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the human dramas playing out beneath them. Somewhere in these mountains, Rafael Corban slept, unaware that justice was coming for him on swift horses with cold eyes and ready guns. And somewhere back in Esperanza, a woman in expensive clothes counted stolen gold and planned her next move, confident in her untouchability, certain that she was too clever to ever be caught. Both of them were about to learn otherwise. The sky was just beginning to lighten in the east when they finally spotted the canyon mouth that Martinez had described. Mercer called a halt while they were still well back from the entrance, out of sight of any sentries who might be posted. This is it, he said quietly. Last chance to turn back, to walk away, and leave this to someone else. No one else is coming, Vargas said. We are all there is, so we finish it. We finish it now. They checked their weapons one final time, made sure their horses were secured where they wouldn't bolt at the sound of gunfire, and then moved forward on foot toward the canyon entrance. Dawn was breaking over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. It should have been beautiful. Instead, it felt like the world holding its breath before the storm. And in the canyon ahead, men were beginning to stir, unaware that their reckoning had arrived. The canyon entrance was narrower than Mercer had imagined from Martinez's description, a gap between towering rock walls barely wide enough for 2 horses to pass abreast. Perfect for defense, perfect for trapping anyone foolish enough to enter. He studied the rim above, looking for sentries, and spotted movement just as the first rays of sunlight touched the eastern peaks. One guard, positioned on the northern rim with a rifle cradled in his arms. From this angle, Mercer couldn't tell if the man was alert or drowsy from a long night watch, but it didn't matter. They'd have to deal with him either way. Vargas saw the guard at the same moment and pointed silently. Then he made a series of hand gestures that Mercer had learned to read over their partnership, a plan communicated without words. Vargas would circle left, climb the rocks on the southern side, and create a distraction. When the guard's attention was drawn away, Mercer and Isabella would move through the canyon entrance and into the camp itself. It was risky, splitting their already small force, but Mercer couldn't see a better option. He nodded his agreement, and Vargas melted into the rocks like smoke, moving with the silence of a predator stalking prey. Minutes crawled past. Mercer counted his own heartbeats, forced himself to breathe slowly despite the adrenaline singing through his veins. Beside him, Isabella crouched behind a boulder, her pistol drawn, her face set in an expression of grim determination. "When we go in," Mercer whispered, "stay low, move fast. We're looking for Corban and any papers, documents, anything that looks like correspondence. We find those, we're halfway to winning this. And if we find Corban first, then we end him. No hesitation, no mercy. He's had 3 years to surrender, 3 years to face justice for what he did. That time's over." The sound that finally came wasn't a distraction. It was an explosion. A sharp crack echoed through the canyon as Vargas's rifle spoke from somewhere high on the southern rim, and the guard on the northern side jerked backward, his own rifle clattering from his hands as he fell. Shouts erupted from within the canyon, men emerging from tents and rough shelters, grabbing weapons, looking for threats. Mercer didn't wait to see more. He burst from cover and ran for the canyon entrance, Isabella right behind him, their boots pounding on the rocky ground. They made it through the narrow gap and into the box canyon beyond, just as the shooting started in earnest. Vargas's rifle cracked again and again from his elevated position, keeping the outlaws pinned down, preventing them from organizing an effective response. But there were too many of them, and they were starting to find cover, starting to return fire toward Vargas's position. The mining camp was a collection of ramshackle structures built around the remnants of old mining equipment, a rusted ore cart, collapsed sluice boxes, the skeletal frame of what had once been a stamp mill. A larger cabin sat at the back of the canyon, built against the rock wall itself. That would be where Corban stayed, where he'd keep anything valuable. Mercer ran for it, weaving between cover as bullets kicked up dust around his feet. He heard Isabella gasp behind him, thought for a terrible moment she'd been hit, but when he glanced back she was still moving, still following. A man emerged from behind the ore cart, gun raised, and Mercer shot him without breaking stride. The outlaw went down hard, clutching his chest. The cabin door burst open and Snake appeared, his pale eyes widening in recognition. "You!" he snarled, bringing his pistol up fast. Mercer was faster. His first shot caught Snake in the shoulder, spinning him around. His second took the man in the chest, dropping him like a puppet with cut strings. Snake hit the ground and didn't move again. 2 more outlaws came around the cabin's far corner, and suddenly Mercer was fighting for his life at close quarters. No time to aim carefully, just point and shoot, and hope his instincts were better than theirs. The first man went down with Mercer's bullet in his throat. The second managed to get off a shot that burned past Mercer's ear, close enough to feel the heat, before Isabella's smaller pistol barked and the outlaw stumbled, clutching his side. Mercer finished him with a shot to the head, and then they were at the cabin door, crashing through into the dim interior. Rafael Corban stood at a table in the back of the single room, frantically stuffing papers into a leather satchel. He looked up as they entered, and Mercer finally saw the face of the man who'd haunted his nightmares for 3 years. Corban was younger than Mercer had expected, perhaps 35, with dark hair and a cruel mouth that twisted into a snarl of rage and fear. His eyes, brown and utterly cold, fixed on Mercer with the predatory focus of a cornered animal, deciding whether to run or fight. "You're the bounty hunter," Corban said, his voice carrying a rough accent that spoke of border towns and hard living. "Martinez talked, didn't he? That little coward sold me out." "He saved himself," Mercer said, his gun steady on Corban's chest. "Something you should have considered 3 years ago before you murdered a camp full of innocent people." Recognition flickered in Corban's eyes. "The mining camp. You were related to someone there." It wasn't a question. "Which one? The carpenter? The woman with the kids?" "My sister and her family," Mercer said, and his voice was colder than winter wind. "You killed them for supplies and horses. Killed children because it was easier than leaving witnesses." "Business," Corban said with a shrug, his hand inching toward the gun on his belt. "Nothing personal. They were just in the wrong place at the wrong time." "So are you." Mercer's finger tightened on the trigger. "Reach for that gun. Give me a reason." But Corban was smarter than that. His hand froze, moved slowly away from the weapon. "You can't just shoot me in cold blood. You're supposed to be better than me, right? You're supposed to believe in justice and trials and all that civilized nonsense. So take me in. Let the law hang me proper." "The law's too slow," Isabella said from beside Mercer, her own gun trained on Corban. "And too often corrupted by people with money and influence, people like Clara Barrett." Corban's eyes widened slightly at the name. "You know about her." "We know everything," Mercer lied. "We know she's been orchestrating the robberies, feeding you information, taking half the profits. We know about the gold hidden in these mountains. We know about the network of corruption she's built. The only question is whether you're going to cooperate or die here in this canyon." Outside, the gunfire had reached a crescendo. Vargas was still holding his position, still keeping the outlaws scattered and disorganized, but Mercer knew it couldn't last. Eventually, they'd flank his partner or rush his position with overwhelming numbers. They were running out of time. "What's in the satchel?" Mercer demanded. "What were you trying to save?" "Insurance," Corban said. "Letters from Clara, plans for future raids, accounting of how the money was split. Everything I'd need to bring her down if she ever tried to betray me, which I'm guessing she's about to do since you're here. She probably sent you to kill me and recover these papers so they couldn't be used against her." "She didn't send us. We figured this out on our own." "Then you're smarter than I gave you credit for." Corban's hand moved again, this time toward the satchel. "Take it. Take all of it. Everything you need to prove Clara Barrett's guilt is in there. Just let me walk out of here alive." "After what you did?" Isabella's voice shook with fury. "After all the people you've killed, all the lives you've destroyed, you think you deserve to walk away?" "I think I deserve a chance," Corban said. "Same as anyone. Same as Martinez got for talking. I cooperate. I testify against Clara. And maybe I get to live. Maybe I spend my life in prison instead of swinging from a rope. That seems fair." Mercer wanted to refuse. Every fiber of his being screamed for him to pull the trigger to end this monster's life right here and now. But the papers in that satchel, if they really did contain evidence of Clara Barrett's guilt, they were more valuable than Corban's death. With that evidence, they could expose the conspiracy, bring down not just one outlaw, but the mastermind who'd orchestrated multiple robberies and probably lined her pockets with hundreds of thousands of dollars in stolen gold. "Give me the satchel," Mercer said. "Slow. No sudden moves." Corban lifted the leather bag carefully, extending it across the table. Mercer reached for it, his eyes never leaving Corban's face, reading the calculation happening behind those cold eyes. The outlaw made his move when Mercer's hand closed on the satchel strap. Corban's other hand flashed to his gun with practiced speed, clearing leather and coming up to fire in one smooth motion. But Mercer had been expecting treachery. He threw himself sideways, pulling Isabella down with him as Corban's first shot went high. Isabella's pistol cracked twice in rapid succession. The first bullet caught Corban in the stomach, doubling him over. The second hit his gun hand and his pistol clattered to the floor. He stumbled backward against the cabin wall, blood spreading across his shirt, his face twisted in pain and disbelief. "Should have taken the deal," Mercer said, rising to his feet. He walked to where Corban had fallen, looking down at the man who'd murdered his family. "Should have surrendered when you had the chance." "She'll win," Corban gasped, blood on his lips. "Clara. She's too smart, too connected. Those papers won't be enough. She'll find a way to wiggle free, and all of this, all your revenge, all your justice, it'll mean nothing." "We'll see." Mercer picked up the satchel, slinging it over his shoulder. "Anything else you want to tell us before you die? Any last confessions?" "The gold," Corban wheezed. 20 cases of it hidden in a cave about 2 miles north of here. Clara was supposed to arrange transport west, sell it through contacts in California. She gets her half, I get mine, and everyone profits. But she was planning to betray me. I heard her lover talking about it. They were going to take all the gold, leave me to hang for the robberies while they disappeared with the fortune. Her lover? Mercer's attention sharpened. Who? Didn't get a name, just heard them meeting once late at night outside her house in Esperanza. Man with an Eastern accent, educated voice. They talked about running away together once this was all over, starting fresh somewhere the law wouldn't find them. It was a missing piece of the puzzle, confirmation that Clara Barrett's corruption ran even deeper than they'd thought. She wasn't just a criminal mastermind, she was a woman planning to abandon her husband, her life, everything, for stolen gold and a secret lover. Corban's breathing was growing labored, his face pale. He looked up at Mercer with something that might have been regret or might have been just fear of the darkness approaching. "I didn't want to kill those people at the mining camp," he whispered. "My men, they got carried away. I tried to stop them, but it happened so fast. The children, I never wanted—" "Don't," Mercer said flatly. "Don't try to make yourself human now. You gave the orders. You led those men. You're responsible for every death, every scream, every drop of blood. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending otherwise." Corban's eyes closed. His breathing stuttered once, twice, then stopped. The man who'd terrorized the territory for years, who'd killed Mercer's family and countless others, died on the floor of a rough cabin in the mountains, bleeding out from wounds inflicted by a woman whose sister he'd helped murder. Isabella stood over the body, her pistol still raised, shaking slightly. "Is it done? Is he really dead?" Mercer checked for a pulse, found nothing. "He's dead." She let out a breath that was half sob, half laugh. "I thought I'd feel different, triumphant or satisfied or something. But I just feel empty." "That's how it works," Mercer said quietly. "Revenge doesn't heal the wound. It just stops the bleeding." The sound of gunfire outside had died down to sporadic shots. Either Vargas had won his fight or he was out of ammunition. Either way, they needed to move. They emerged from the cabin to find the canyon in chaos. Bodies lay scattered among the makeshift shelters, some shot, some wounded and groaning. The survivors had either fled deeper into the canyon or surrendered, throwing down their weapons and raising their hands. And standing in the center of it all, covered in dust and gun smoke but very much alive, was Santiago Vargas. "About time," Vargas called out. "I was running low on bullets and patience. Tell me you got what we came for." Mercer held up the satchel. "Corban's dead and we've got evidence that should sink Clara Barrett, plus the location of the stolen gold." Then this was a good day's work." Vargas surveyed the canyon with satisfaction. "Though we should leave quickly before any of Corban's men who ran away decide to come back with reinforcements." They gathered the surviving outlaws, 5 men, all wounded, all terrified, and bound them with rope from the camp supplies. Marshal Dawson would have to send men to collect them later, but at least they were secured and disarmed. The ride back to Las Cruces took most of the day, and by the time they arrived the sun was setting again, painting the sky in shades that reminded Mercer too much of blood. They went straight to the marshal's office, where Dawson was just lighting the evening lamps. "You're alive," Dawson said, genuine surprise and relief in his voice. "And from the looks of you, successful." "Corban's dead," Mercer reported. "His gang is scattered. 5 prisoners secured at the mining camp waiting for your deputies to collect them. And we have evidence, documentary proof, that Clara Barrett has been orchestrating the robberies from the beginning." He placed the satchel on Dawson's desk and opened it. Inside were dozens of letters, all in that same elegant handwriting from the note Isabella had shown them days ago. Instructions for raids, information about bank schedules, detailed plans for splitting the profits. And most damning of all, several letters signed with Clara's full name, leaving no doubt about her identity. Dawson read through them with growing disbelief, his face darkening with each page. "This is incredible. How could she think she'd get away with this?" "She almost did," Vargas pointed out. "If Martinez had not talked, if we had not connected the pieces, she would still be free and planning her next move. She is clever, this one. Dangerous. She needs to be arrested immediately," Dawson said, "before she hears about Corban's death and tries to run. I'll wire Esperanza, have Marshal Keaton take her into custody tonight." "Make sure he secures her house first," Mercer said. "Look for more evidence, more correspondence. And watch for her lover, an educated man with an Eastern accent, according to Corban. He's part of this too." Dawson nodded, already drafting the telegram in his mind. "You 3 should rest. You've done more than anyone had a right to expect. The law can handle it from here." But even as he said it, Mercer knew it wasn't that simple. The law could arrest Clara Barrett, could put her on trial, could even hang her for her crimes. But would it? She was a wealthy woman, wife of a prominent banker, with connections throughout the territory. She'd hire expensive lawyers, exploit every loophole, delay an appeal, and fight with the resources that stolen gold could buy, unless they made absolutely certain she couldn't escape justice. "I'm going back to Esperanza," Mercer said. "Tonight. I want to be there when she's arrested. Want to see her face when she realizes it's over." "Luke, you are exhausted," Vargas said. "We all are. Another night will make no difference." "It might. Every hour she's free is another hour she could use to destroy evidence or bribe witnesses or arrange her escape. I'm not taking that chance." Isabella stepped forward. "Then I'm coming with you. I've earned the right to see this through to the end." Mercer looked at her. This young woman who'd lost her sister, who'd risked everything to escape Corban's gang and help bring him down, and he couldn't deny her. She deserved to witness Clara Barrett's fall from grace, deserved to know that her sister's death had been avenged. "We all go," Vargas decided. "One last ride together, and then perhaps we can finally rest." They left Las Cruces within the hour, pushing their tired horses harder than they should have, but unable to slow down when they were this close to ending it completely. The moon rose full and bright, lighting their path, and they rode through the night with grim determination. Dawn was breaking when they finally saw Esperanza's buildings on the horizon. The town was just waking up, shopkeepers opening their doors, early risers starting their daily routines. Everything looked normal, peaceful, giving no hint of the storm about to break over it. They went straight to the marshal's office, where Keaton was already at his desk. The telegram from Dawson spread before him. He looked up as they entered, his weathered face troubled. "I got the message," Keaton said without preamble. "Clara Barrett, orchestrating the robberies. I've been a lawman for 30 years, and I never would have suspected her. Never." "Well, that's what made her so effective," Mercer said. "No one suspected because no one would believe it. Where is she now?" "Still at home, as far as I know. I've had a deputy watching the house since the telegram arrived. She hasn't tried to leave." Keaton stood, reaching for his gun belt. "But we need to move carefully. Thomas Barrett is a powerful man in this territory. We accuse his wife of these crimes without ironclad proof, and there'll be hell to pay." "We have proof." Mercer gestured to the satchel he still carried. Letters in her own handwriting, detailing every aspect of the operation. That's as ironclad as it gets. They walked to the Barrett house together. Mercer, Vargas, Isabella, and Keaton. A small army of justice marching through the morning streets. The house was one of the finest in Esperanza. A two-story structure with white-painted columns and a manicured garden that spoke of money and taste. The deputy Keaton had stationed outside confirmed that no one had entered or left since he'd taken up his post. Keaton knocked firmly on the door. It was opened moments later by a Mexican woman in servant's clothes, her eyes widening at the sight of the marshal and his armed companions. "We're here to see Mrs. Barrett," Keaton said. "Official business. Is she home?" "She is having breakfast in the dining room, senor. But Mr. Barrett, he left early this morning on business. He is not here." "That's fine. It's Mrs. Barrett we need to speak with." They followed the servant through the house, and Mercer couldn't help noticing the expensive furnishings, the imported carpets, the oil paintings on the walls. All bought with honest money from the bank? Or had some of it come from stolen gold? Had Clara Barrett been living in luxury purchased with the blood and tears of the people her husband was supposed to serve? The dining room was at the back of the house, bright with morning sunlight streaming through tall windows. Clara Barrett sat at the head of a long table, delicately cutting a piece of toast, a cup of tea steaming at her elbow. She looked up as they entered, and Mercer finally saw the woman who'd caused so much suffering. She was beautiful in a cold, precise way, sharp features, calculating eyes, blonde hair pinned up in an elaborate style that probably took her maid an hour to arrange. She wore an expensive morning dress in pale blue, and her hands, resting on the white tablecloth, were adorned with rings that caught the light. "Marshal Keaton," she said, her voice cultured and controlled. "What an unexpected visit, and you've brought guests." Her eyes swept over Mercer, Vargas, and Isabella, lingering on each face with shrewd assessment. "Should I be alarmed?" "Clara Barrett," Keaton said formally, "I'm placing you under arrest for conspiracy to commit robbery, for receiving stolen property, and as an accessory to murder. You have the right to—" "Don't be absurd," Clara interrupted, her tone sharp. "Arrest me? On what grounds? What possible evidence could you have for such ridiculous accusations?" Mercer stepped forward and emptied the satchel onto her breakfast table. Letters scattered across the white cloth, some falling into her tea, others landing in her eggs. Clara's face went white, as she recognized her own handwriting. "These grounds," Mercer said. "Dozens of letters in your hand, giving Rafael Corban detailed instructions for every bank robbery over the past 4 months. Plans for splitting the profits. Information about guard schedules and vault shipments. Your signature on half of them. Should I continue?" Clara's composure cracked for just a moment, genuine fear flickering across her face before she locked it down behind a mask of aristocratic disdain. "Those are forgeries," she said. "Someone is trying to frame me. I've never written any such letters. I've never even heard of Rafael Corban except in the newspapers." "Funny," Vargas said, picking up one of the letters, "because Corban knew you quite well. He told us about your lover before he died. The educated man with the Eastern accent. The one you were planning to run away with once you'd stolen enough gold." This time Clara couldn't hide her reaction. She actually flinched, her hand going to her throat in an unconscious gesture of distress. "Who is he?" Isabella demanded, stepping closer to the table. "Who's the man you betrayed your husband with while you were orchestrating murders and robberies?" "I don't know what you're talking about," Clara said, but her voice had lost its certainty. "This is all fantasy, wild speculation by bounty hunters looking to collect a reward. When my husband hears about this, your husband will hear that his wife is a criminal and an adulteress," Keaton said bluntly. "He'll hear it in court when you're tried for your crimes. Now stand up, Mrs. Barrett. You're coming with me." Clara stood slowly, her movements precise and controlled despite the disaster unfolding around her. "You're making a terrible mistake. I have friends, powerful friends. I'll have lawyers who will tear apart every piece of your so-called evidence. And when I'm acquitted, and I will be acquitted, I'll make sure everyone involved in this farce pays dearly." "We'll see," Mercer said. "But right now the only thing you need to worry about is how many years you'll spend in prison, or whether they'll just hang you and be done with it." As Keaton moved to handcuff Clara, the sound of horses approaching fast made everyone freeze. Through the dining room windows, Mercer saw 3 riders pulling up in front of the house, dismounting quickly. One of them was Thomas Barrett, his face thunderous. The other 2 were well-dressed men Mercer didn't recognize, but their bearing screamed wealth and authority. Barrett burst into the house moments later, the other men following close behind. He stopped short when he saw his wife standing with the marshal, her wrists in iron cuffs. "What in hell is going on here?" Barrett demanded. "Keaton, why are you manhandling my wife?" "I'm arresting her, Tom. I'm sorry, but the evidence is clear. Clara's been working with Rafael Corban, orchestrating the bank robberies." "That's insane. Clara would never—" Barrett's words died as he caught sight of the letters spread across the table. He walked closer, picked one up, and Mercer saw the exact moment when recognition and horror dawned on the banker's face. "This is your handwriting," he said to Clara, his voice barely above a whisper. "These are your words." "Thomas, I can explain." "How?" Barrett's voice rose, anger and betrayal twisting his features. "How do you explain planning robberies of banks, including my own? How do you explain conspiracy with murderers? How do you explain any of this?" Clara's mask finally shattered completely. Her face crumpled, tears starting to stream down her cheeks, but there was calculation even in her crying. "I did it for us," she said desperately. "The bank was failing, Thomas. You were so worried about it, so stressed. I thought if I could arrange to recover most of the stolen money, if I could be the hero who saved everything, you'd finally see me as more than just a decorative wife. I thought, you thought you'd profit from robberies while people lost their life savings?" One of the well-dressed men who'd entered with Barrett stepped forward, and Mercer recognized him from descriptions. This was Judge Pierce from the Territorial Court. "You thought you'd cover your crimes by playing the victim?" "Mrs. Barrett, I've seen many criminals attempt many defenses, but this might be the most pathetic." "The gold," Mercer said, addressing Barrett directly. "Corban told us before he died that 20 cases of it are hidden in a cave 2 miles north of his mining camp. Your wife was planning to arrange transport to California, sell it through her connections there. Half for Corban, half for her and her lover. I assume you weren't her lover, Mr. Barrett." The banker's face had gone gray. "No, I was not." "Then who?" Keaton demanded of Clara. "Who were you planning to run away with? Who else is involved in this conspiracy?" Clara pressed her lips together, refusing to answer. But her eyes flickered involuntarily toward the second well-dressed man who'd accompanied Barrett, a handsome man in his 40s with Eastern features and expensive clothes. The man saw her look and took a step backward. "Don't you dare!" he hissed. "Don't you say a word, Clara." "Mr. Ashford," Judge Pierce said slowly, his eyes narrowing. "You're looking remarkably nervous for someone who should have nothing to hide." Richard Ashford, Mercer knew the name now. He was a lawyer from Boston who'd come to the territory 2 years ago, supposedly to invest in mining operations. Wealthy, educated, exactly matching Corban's description of Clara's mysterious lover. "I have no idea what you're implying," Ashford said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I barely know Mrs. Barrett. We're merely social acquaintances." "Search his things," Mercer said to Keaton. "His hotel room, his office, wherever he keeps his papers. I'd bet everything I own that you'll find evidence connecting him to Clara and to the robberies." "You have no authority to order searches," Ashford snapped. "I demand to speak with my own lawyer before I answer any questions." "Then you'll speak to him from a cell," Judge Pierce said. "Marshal Keaton, take both of them into custody. We'll sort out who's guilty of what after a proper investigation." The arrests were made swiftly after that. Clara Barrett and Richard Ashford were marched out of the house in handcuffs, placed in a wagon, and taken to the jail under heavy guard. Thomas Barrett followed behind, his face a mask of shock and grief, a man watching his entire life collapse in the space of minutes. The third man who'd accompanied them revealed himself to be a federal marshal from Santa Fe, brought in by Barrett when the banker had received word of strange inquiries being made about his wife. He thanked Mercer, Vargas, and Isabella for their work, promised them the full reward money within the week, and assured them that Clara and Ashford would face the full weight of territorial justice. As the commotion died down and the house emptied, Mercer found himself standing in the dining room where it had all ended, looking at the scattered letters that had brought down a criminal empire. "Is it done?" Isabella asked quietly from the doorway. "Is it really over?" "The arrests are done," Mercer said. "The trial will come, probably conviction and sentencing. The stolen gold will be recovered and returned to the banks. Corban's gang is destroyed. So yes, I suppose it's over." "Then why don't you sound satisfied?" Mercer was quiet for a moment, trying to identify the emotion sitting heavy in his chest. "Because my sister is still dead. Her husband and children are still gone. Justice doesn't bring them back. It just means the people who killed them finally paid for it." Isabella moved to stand beside him. "My sister is still dead too, but at least now she can rest knowing that her murderers faced consequences. That's worth something, isn't it?" "It is," Mercer agreed. "It's worth everything. It just doesn't feel like I thought it would." Vargas entered the room then, his scarred face showing the exhaustion they all felt. "The federal marshal wants statements from all of us. Detailed accounts of everything that happened, from Esperanza to the mining camp to here. It will take hours." "Then we'd better get started," Mercer said. "The sooner we finish with the paperwork, the sooner we can leave this place behind." The next 3 days were a blur of statements and testimony, of federal marshals and territorial investigators asking the same questions in slightly different ways, of paperwork that seemed to multiply like weeds. But slowly, the complete picture of the conspiracy emerged. Clara Barrett had been planning the robberies for over a year, ever since she'd begun her affair with Richard Ashford. The lawyer had connections in California to buyers of stolen goods, knew how to move large amounts of gold without attracting attention. Together they'd recruited Rafael Corban, promising him wealth in exchange for his ruthlessness. The precision timing of the raids had been Clara's idea. She'd carefully researched each target bank, learned their schedules and security procedures, and passed the information to Corban through a network of intermediaries that had kept her identity hidden until now. The gold that Corban had mentioned was indeed found in a cave north of his mining camp, all 20 cases of it, worth nearly $400,000. It was returned to the various banks that had been robbed, restoring much of what had been stolen. The reward money was distributed to Mercer, Vargas, and Isabella, though Mercer donated most of his share to the families of Corban's victims. Thomas Barrett resigned from the bank, unable to continue in a position that reminded him daily of his wife's betrayal. He left Esperanza shortly after the trial began, moving back east to family he hadn't seen in years, trying to rebuild a life that had been shattered beyond recognition. The trial itself was swift and merciless. Clara Barrett and Richard Ashford were both convicted on multiple counts of conspiracy, theft, and accessory to murder. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning guilty verdicts. Clara was sentenced to 30 years in the territorial prison. Ashford received 25. Both would serve their time in separate facilities, never to see each other again. On the day the sentences were handed down, Mercer sat in the courtroom gallery and watched Clara's face as the judge pronounced her fate. She showed no emotion, maintaining her aristocratic composure to the very end. But as the guards led her away, she looked directly at Mercer, and in that moment he saw the truth behind her mask. Not remorse, not regret, but cold calculation. She was already planning her next move, already thinking about appeals and pardons and escape. But those were problems for the future. For now, justice had been served. Mercer left Esperanza on a bright morning a week after the trial ended. Vargas rode with him for a few miles before they reached a crossroads where their paths diverged. "Where will you go?" Vargas asked as they sat their horses in the middle of the dusty road. "North, maybe. I heard there's work for a good tracker in Montana Territory. Some cattle rustlers need catching, and the law up there pays well." Mercer paused, then added, "What about you?" "South, I think. Back to Mexico for a while. Visit my daughter's grave, pay my respects. Maybe find a quiet village where an old gunman can rest without looking over his shoulder constantly." Vargas grinned. "Or maybe not. I'm not very good at quiet." "No, you're not." Mercer extended his hand. "It's been an honor riding with you, Santiago. If you ever need a partner for another hunt, you know where to find me." "Likewise, my friend." Vargas gripped Mercer's hand firmly. "Stay alive, stay sharp. And remember, justice is not always found in courtrooms and legal proceedings. Sometimes it is found at the end of a gun barrel, in the eyes of a dying outlaw who finally understands that his time has come." They parted ways then, Vargas heading south toward the border and whatever future waited for him there. Mercer watched him go until he was just a distant speck on the horizon, then turned his horse north. He found Isabella waiting for him at the northern edge of town, sitting on her mare with a small pack of supplies tied behind her saddle. "I thought you might try to leave without saying goodbye," she said as he approached. "I considered it," Mercer admitted. "Goodbyes aren't my strong suit." "Mine either. But I wanted to thank you properly before we went our separate ways. You gave me justice for my sister. You gave me a purpose when I thought I had nothing left. That's a debt I can't repay." "You don't owe me anything. We helped each other. That's what decent people do." Isabella smiled, and for the first time since Mercer had met her, it reached her eyes. "Where will you go now?" "North? There's always work for someone willing to hunt down bad men and bring them to justice." "What about you?" "West, I think. California. Start fresh where no one knows my past, where I can be someone other than the woman who lost her sister to outlaws. Maybe open a shop, sell dresses or hats or something practical." She paused, then asked quietly, "Do you think we'll ever stop running? Stop looking for the next fight, the next cause to throw ourselves into?" "I don't know," Mercer said honestly. "Maybe some wounds are too deep to heal. Maybe we carry them forever, and the best we can do is make sure they mean something. Make sure the pain leads to purpose. That's a sad way to live. Maybe, but it's the way we've chosen. And there are worse things than dedicating your life to protecting the innocent from the predatory." Isabella urged her mare forward until she was alongside Mercer. She leaned over and kissed him on the cheek, a gesture of friendship and farewell that carried no romance but all the warmth of shared suffering and survival. "Take care of yourself, Luke Mercer. The world needs more men like you, whether you believe it or not." "You too, Isabella Mendez. The world needs more women brave enough to stand up when everything tells them to run." She rode away then, heading west toward California and new beginnings, her dark hair streaming behind her in the morning breeze. Mercer watched until she too disappeared into the distance, one more person who'd touched his life and moved on, leaving only memories and the knowledge that somewhere out there, someone was fighting the same fight he was. Then he turned his horse north and rode toward whatever waited for him beyond the horizon. The sun climbed higher in the cloudless sky, the heat building as morning advanced toward afternoon. Somewhere ahead, criminals were planning their next scores, outlaws were terrorizing frontier towns, and desperate people were praying for someone to restore justice to their lives. Luke Mercer intended to answer those prayers, one hunt at a time, for as long as his gun hand stayed steady and his heart kept beating. He'd lost his family to violence, had spent 3 years consumed by the need for vengeance. Now, with that need finally satisfied, he'd discovered something unexpected, that justice was its own reward, that protecting the innocent gave meaning to a life that had seemed empty after loss. He thought of Sarah and Robert, of little Emma and Thomas who never got the chance to grow up. He thought of them every day, would carry their memory with him until the day he died. But now, instead of just grief and rage, those memories carried purpose. He hunted men like Corban, not just to avenge the past, but to protect the future. To make sure that some other family wouldn't experience the horror his sister's family had endured. It wasn't redemption exactly. It wasn't healing. But it was something. A path forward through the darkness. A way to transform pain into purpose and loss into legacy. The frontier stretched before him, vast and wild and filled with danger, but also filled with opportunity, with the chance to make a difference in lives that desperately needed someone to care. Luke Mercer rode north into that vast wilderness, a lone figure on horseback carrying justice in his guns and determination in his heart. Behind him, the town of Esperanza faded into memory. Another chapter closed, another mission complete. Ahead lay the unknown, the next fight, the next chance to stand between evil and innocence. And somewhere in the mountains, in the spaces between civilization and chaos, between law and lawlessness, justice rode on swift horses with ready guns, dispensed by those willing to face darkness so others could live in light. The hunt would never truly end. There would always be another outlaw, another conspiracy, another victim crying out for someone to care. But that was all right. Luke Mercer had found his purpose in the ashes of tragedy, had discovered that some wounds became strengths when channeled properly. He rode toward the horizon, toward whatever justice needed doing next, leaving behind a territory that slept a little safer, knowing that even in the wilderness, even in the spaces where law couldn't reach, there were still those who refused to let evil go unanswered. The legend of the quiet bounty hunter who'd brought down an entire criminal empire would spread through saloons and settlements, growing with each telling until it became frontier mythology. But the man himself cared nothing for legends or fame. He cared only for the work, for the next hunt, for the next chance to restore balance to a world that desperately needed it. And so he rode on into legend, into history, into the wild lands that bred both monsters and the men who hunted them, carrying with him the memory of those he'd lost, and the determination to protect those who still lived. Justice on the frontier had many faces. Sometimes it wore a judge's robes, sometimes a marshal's badge. But sometimes, when the law failed and corruption ran deep, justice wore trail dust and gun smoke, rode a tired horse, and carried cold eyes that had seen too much death but refused to look away. Luke Mercer was that justice. And the frontier would remember his passage long after the dust of his horse's hooves had settled back to earth.